rid of all the Siberian elm trees. The weeds, trees.
You have to get it done, get used to it.
Does this one work? Is this one working?
I feel it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Might want to do it a little closer.
We're going to try to share.
We can put this one in the middle if you want.
We can share them.
We can share. We won't spit on each other. It'll be okay. All right, so if you're ready, Susan, Ryan, where'd Ryan go? Oh, he's behind you? Okay.
Do you have any more agendas?
Ready. John Peacock passed them out at our meeting.
I missed it. That's all right.
Share.
George and I will follow along.
They're in the back.
Wasn't anything there? Okay. He's got some.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, guys.
You guys ready?
They gave me a
We gave
gavel.
Patty a gavel.
Hey, that's you're out of jurisdiction. This is Basalt Council.
He told me I could
I
share.
gave her
that.
He gave
Gave
me
her
one.
that gavel.
She doesn't get one often, so we're going to double gavel it tonight.
Okay, I'm done. I did
Thanks,
my one
everyone, for
gavel.
coming. Yeah, thank you, Susan, for giving her one.
I'm done.
This is a work session with the Town Council of Basalt, with the Pickens County Commissioners, and we always welcome the commissioners that make their way down here. I know George lives near here, but not all of them do, so thank you guys for coming down. And so tonight, we are going to discuss a couple items, and I don't even have that, but the first item will be the Whitewater Park. And so, who is going to lead the discussion on the Whitewater Park?
Can we do introductions since we have new members at
Oh,
your
we do.
table?
Yes, we can definitely do that. So we'll start with
Auden Schindler.
Bill Infante. Steve Child.
Patty Clapper.
Gary Tenenbaum.
Ryan Slack.
Jennifer Riffle.
Greg Poshman.
And George Newman.
Great, thanks. Okay, so I guess
I
it's
guess
John.
Ely's
It's him
stepping
coming
up.
I volunteered because I don't have a lot to say. I'll just set this up for the presenters. The presentation tonight, we're hoping to be somewhat abbreviated if anybody has attended any of the focus groups in the past. What we'd like to do, though, is review the proposed conclusion to the kayak park and its interrelation with the existing fisherman's park, and if possible, get council and commissioner acceptance or ratification or a stamp of good approval so that we can move forward and develop specifications and start to develop pricing and sequencing of the various component parts. So here tonight from Blue Green is Sherry Sanzone and Scott Bachman to talk about the design that they have produced after many meetings with various specifically identified focus groups and user groups for the kayak park and associated facilities.
John, and I just want to mention that Auden, Jennifer, and George and I met some time ago with staff, and you were there, and discussed this, trying to give some direction and some ideas of what to kind of pick and choose from the different plans that Sherry presented to us. And I thought that was a great meeting, a good opportunity for the two council and the Board of Commissioners to start an early collaboration on this project. So I'm excited to see, because I haven't seen yet what is the end result of what we discussed at that meeting, but I thought it was a great way to start it off, to have the representatives from both council and board to start moving this project forward. So I wanted to thank everybody for that.
Okay.
Great. Lisa, are you sitting up here too? No. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. We understand we have 20 minutes to tell you all that we've learned and all the ideas that have been pulled together into this plan, and then leave another 20 minutes for questions and answers, if that works with your schedule. So as John said, we've been working on this for a number of months. We used a stakeholder process. We grabbed people who were willing to participate and had the energy and enthusiasm to put into the effort to join us, and then also folks that represented a variety of what we were calling user groups. There's some pretty obvious ones there now, including the kayakers and the stand-up paddleboarders that are in the water, but then other people that may not think that this is a place for them. We wanted to grab those people and have them participate, plus other folks like the Roaring Fork Conservancy, ACES, the Aspen Center of Environmental Studies, teachers, certainly the kayakers, anglers, rafting folks. So we had a really diverse group of people. We had a member of the town's post committee who participated as well. So we'll walk through all of that. But one of the kind of the start of the project was really around one premise. And Sam, if you could advance. Thank you. Oh yeah,
Yes,
that'd be
please.
great. Thank you. So the goal really when we started working with Lisa and John was, you know, the in-stream features serve an important purpose. They are a way for Pickens County to have a recreational use in the river, which allows them to be able to ensure that there's a minimum amount of water in the river at all times. That's very important, and certainly you can answer questions about that more than I can. But we started with that as the primary premise of why, you know, what's the fundamental problem that we're trying to solve. The in-stream features have been really successful, and so that has brought some additional needs that we wanted to address. And so a lot of those were listed up here as far as additional benefits, but these came from working with the stakeholders, understanding how people were using the property, being there at all times of the year to understand the potential users and the activities that people are engaging in or wanting to engage in, and then also just having a better understanding of what those potential needs might be. So a lot of the benefits are listed here. They include creating safer conditions for everyone who's there now and could potentially come to this space. Being able to improve access to the features for people who might be mobility challenged or just older folks that have a tougher time getting down to the water's edge. Also very important for the river habitat is really protecting not only the riparian conditions, but then we've also learned that the Cottonwood Gallery that's on the Pickens County side and the Ponderosa Forest that's on the town of Basalt side of the owned lands are very sensitive environments, and being able to protect those are really important needs that were identified. We also learned that there are a lot of conflicts between users. Seems surprising, but sometimes there are, and so being able to reduce conflicts between kayakers and anglers, different rafting groups, both in the water and then folks that are coming to experience the park, the in-stream features today and the areas around it, was something that was identified as an important need for the effort. We also saw this as an opportunity to educate folks about the importance of maintaining minimum stream flows in the river, and then also just other safety things that people should know, but then also understanding more about this really special environment. A lot of functional constraints that were brought to our attention and that have been addressed in the plan, including how trailers with boats negotiate this area and use the boat launch. Where do they park? How do they move around? And then other people, how they're moving with their vehicles. Working with our post-stakeholder group member and then just understanding the town of Basalt's plans, that there are a lot of hopes for this area of the town in Pickens County, and being able to complete these really important pedestrian and bicycle links in this area was also a need that was identified. And then also by putting these improvements in, the hope is that there's an infrastructure that will allow different events to be supported, whether they're events that the town of Basalt sponsors or Pickens County sponsors. They could be whitewater events, just lots of opportunity that's here that people brought to our attention that we want to make sure are not lost in any of the park planning. So again, we've worked with a lot of different stakeholders and different potential user groups. These were two diagrams that we used to help capture all of the comments that we received, areas that people felt were particularly interesting to them as far as the area for the potential park, and then how their needs and desires could be accommodated in different ways. And by collecting all these folks, and again, they were kind of the passers-by that emerged when they saw that there was something to see in the river and would come across the street, not crossing at a crosswalk, but just coming across the street to see what was happening. Different families who may be active, they have small children, they may be bringing their dog with them, how they could use the space, boaters, emergency services, the providers. We met with both the police chief, fire marshal, and others to understand how this could become and continue to be a safe place for people to spend time. And then the different environmental education opportunities. We even considered birders, people that might want to bird watch on the space, cyclists, and then what does this park become in the wintertime? Can it still be used and be a really active, enjoyed space? So all of those needs really coalesced into two options, which we're calling Flow and Eddy. Go to the next one. Thank you. Also, as a part of the process, we use precedent images of other parks, other spaces that people could either, oh, I've been there, I know that, or that looks really interesting, and that helps communicate what I'm trying to tell you in words. And through the process, we've used a lot of different images to kind of capture the character of what people are hoping for. And in general, it's more of a refined, kind of rustic aesthetic, using natural materials, materials that will wear well, weather well, be lower maintenance. And then also, we heard the importance of continuing the character of some of the town's recent improvements with park spaces. And so when this would be completed, that everything would aesthetically tie together and be part of the brand of the town of Basalt, as well as being a part of Picken County's parks and open space and trail systems. Next one, please. Thank you. And to remind us all what this property looks like in the fall, which was one of the most beautiful times to photograph. This is a compilation of photographs that show the Two Rivers side of the park area. And the next slide, please. Great. And then the other side, including Fisherman's Park and, of course, the in-stream features that were built this past summer and in use this past summer. So we'll go, since we don't have a lot of time, just cover the highlights of Flow. The improvements in the Flow option really focused on the area around the in-stream features. And Sam, can you show us where those are, please? Thanks. And most of the improvements in this option really focused on kind of the in-stream features as a catalyst, making sure that it worked really well for kayakers and other water users. But then also served other important purposes that were identified by the stakeholders. It includes a pedestrian bridge. Both options included a pedestrian bridge. That was a recommendation in the town's post plan, and it seemed like an important connection piece for that everyone agreed would be important in the plan. It also included improvements to Fisherman's Park, trail connections through the spaces so you could experience the Cottonwood Gallery, you could experience the Ponderosa Forest. But it also improves safety as far as getting people off of Two Rivers Road and being in a safer pedestrian condition. We'll go to the next one, thanks. And then in section, this is what this option could look like. It had the pedestrian bridge. It also took advantage of some height that we might be able to accomplish and create a viewing tower. We didn't get a lot of positive comments on that towards the end, so you won't see that in the preferred plan. But then also help to describe what some of these spaces might feel like if people were to spend time there. Next plan. And then the second plan was Eddy, and the highlights of this plan were to create multiple opportunities for people to enjoy the two properties, to be able to encourage use throughout rather than being concentrated just on the in-stream features. And so in this plan, you'll see that there are more trail options on both the Picken County part of the property, which is closest to Two Rivers Road, and then also the town of Basalt-owned property, which is closer to Highway 82 in this plan. It also anticipated with the completion of the Roaring Fork apartments that there would be more people within walking distance here, and that perhaps creating a plan that accommodated those new users would be something that would be important to look at here. Great, and go to the next one. And then again, what that might look like in section as far as a relationship to the road and the different properties, and then some character images of what those spaces might feel like. Okay. So working through the stakeholder groups and the focus groups, we were able to pull the elements of each plan that people really liked and thought were appropriate to this property, appropriate to the town of Basalt and to Pitkin County, and pulled it together into what we're calling the preferred plan. So I think I might start on the left-hand side and move across to make sure that we don't miss anything. But on the left-hand side, which is the part of the property that's closest to where we are today, we have an additional parking spaces in the parking area that was created this past summer. It also includes an ADA designated space. And then the ramp down would be improved to make it easier for people with challenges mobility-wise to be able to negotiate that ramp and then get down onto the platform. We also have in that area a new restroom that also includes a changing room for people that want to get out of their wetsuits, get out of their wet clothes, and get in to dry clothes at the end of their time spent at the park. One of the other aspects in this plan, which is really important, was this, I think Jason called them the sandwich eaters. People that just come and they just want to see what's happening in the park. It's turned out to be a tremendous spectator sport to see what's happening there, and having opportunities for people to sit, just one person eating their lunch, but also a space that's flexible enough to accommodate small events, to make sure that there's a viewing area for those to happen, is in the central area next to the two in-stream features. We also create a path that gets people off of Two Rivers Road and down a little bit lower. So we have a vertical separation, and we'll see that in this section, but it's a safer way for people to move along there rather than along the shoulder, which was happening last summer. We've also incorporated some water quality improvement features as a part of this section of Two Rivers Road. A lot of the stormwater today drains directly into the river as it moves down that steep slope, and creating things like rain gardens and other opportunities to improve the water quality before it moves into the river seem to be an important thing to do, since this project really is inherently about the river. And then moving a little bit further up valley, if you notice that in the fall of, was it the fall or spring of this year? It must have been fall, when the new platform was created.
Yeah, in the fall.
In the fall, thank you. There was an expansion of kind of that lower platform
winter,
area,
actually.
or the
Yeah,
winter,
yeah.
And that's created a really great opportunity for people to spend more time in the space, and kind of these little tests have been really great opportunities to see how people have used the spaces as they've been brought online. And so that new little flat area would be the landing point for one end of the pedestrian bridge, which would connect both sides of the property across the river. And then from this area, back to Fisherman's Park, we have two paths. These are envisioned to be elevated above the ground plane, and that allows these to be usable throughout the season, even in the spring when the water level comes up so high. And then on the lower part at the river's edge, there's opportunities to get off the path, to be able to spend some time, have these really beautiful view opportunities, and also be kind of points where fishermen can start, their path to the river's edge, to really make it easier and more usable for people to be able to have access to the river. In this option, we also have an improved boat launch. One of the problems that we saw is that when people were backing in to bring their boats down the boat launch, they had to use the travel lanes of Two Rivers Road to be able to do that. And so to create a safer condition, we're expanding the shoulder in that area to be able to allow people to back in and be able to do that maneuver safely. Again, we have the pedestrian path that gets people off of Two Rivers Road and has a much nicer, safer experience for them to walk between Fisherman's Park and the in-stream features, which are really our two kind of anchor mall tenants, if you will, of this park space. At Fisherman's Park, there's improved parking. We've added some additional parking spaces there to meet demand. Also additional trailer parking spaces to meet the latent demand we believe is there for people with boats and trailers. And then the park area is expanded. The pavilion is expanded to be able to accommodate larger numbers of people. The restrooms are expanded to be able to serve a larger need for restrooms in this area and additional changing opportunities. And then there's a flexible space that would be built as a part of that, that could be work really well for just a couple of folks who may just want to have a picnic there, but it also is flexible in that it'll allow for larger events if those were to come to the park in the future. There's also learning opportunities and opportunity for classes to be organized with amphitheater seating, you know, to get school groups here, to be able to get the children organized before they cross Two Rivers Road and then come into the park proper. Let's see, and then on the town side, we heard a lot of concern about overdevelopment on the town side, and especially in the Ponderosa Forest. There's some really amazing plant species that live there, and some of the uses that have happened in that space over time have been detrimental to the health of that forest. And so the paths that you see here are really memorializing some of the social trails that are in that land already, and formalizing those and encouraging the use of those trails rather than creating new ones in this space to help protect the other areas. We still would have the emergency access off of Emma Road, and that's really important. And the fire chief and police chief really liked to see that as an option, as well as we've added an access off of Two Rivers Road that they've asked for and that we've accommodated in the plan. It makes a lot of sense. And then for a program, kind of as we move around, getting closer to the town of Basalt on this side of the river, there's a proposed nature play area, something very simple. We have an image of what that may look like. That would be really useful for small children as well as older adults to be able to have a use on both sides of the river that really helps connect the spaces. And one of our stakeholder or focus group members, Allie, she's a professional kayaker, but she's also a professional kindergarten teacher, and she asked her students to draw what they'd like to see in the park, and we just got these images today of what they'd like to see. So a climbing feature with big rocks on the bottom and little rocks on top was one of the ideas, which we're pretty excited about because that fits in perfectly. So we can go to the next slide, please. We had like 3 different colors. Great, and then these are, again, are some images of what the character might look like for these spaces, and then the section through from Two Rivers Road on the left-hand side and then across to the town-owned lands on the right. So you can see the scale of the pedestrian bridge is much smaller than what one of the options showed. It's a much more pedestrian scale bridge. The concept of these viewing areas that help deal with that very steep slope along Two Rivers Road will help retain that but create places for people to sit and spend time. The improvements to Two Rivers Road would include narrowing the lanes to 11 feet wide, which the fire chief and the police chief support, and be able to use that borrowed space from those travel lanes to create a dedicated bike lane on the Elk Run side of Two Rivers, and then also be able to accommodate the rain gardens and other stormwater features that we had talked about in this area. And then you can see on the town of Basalt owned land, it's a much, it still preserves the very natural character, and it's really about a preservation effort on that side of the river to really maintain that beautiful Ponderosa forest. Great, and again, images on the bottom include what that upper walkway might look like and kind of the top of that viewing area, the nature play area in the middle, using fallen trees and other types of elements that you would find in a forest that would be engaging for play, and then what the boardwalk might look like as you're moving between the in-stream features and Fisherman's Park. Great. I think that's our last slide, right? Okay. And so what, I guess for tonight for us, it's really important to hear from you any direction that you might have, comments, of course, and then I think what we're hoping to be able to come away with is a general, hey, you're moving in the right direction, this looks really good, maybe you look at this a little more closely, and then our next step would be to identify what makes sense as the first phase of this park, and be able to work to develop a budget. We have been putting together a conceptual budget, and we just got some numbers today to be able to pull the whole thing together, but we find that it's probably gonna be most important to be able to identify a first phase and have a more detailed price put to that, and then bring that back to you for review and hopefully approval.
Lisa, you got anything?
Nope, that's pretty much it, yeah.
I'll jump in. As far as phasing, I think it's important because of our really early discussions we had with public safety. I think we need to look at the public safety factors that we could start moving on sooner than later.
Great.
The crossings, the access for first responders. I think those issues would be a good first phase for me, because I'd rather put public safety first and do some of the other amenities later on.
Right.
So I don't know how you could break that down, but that's kind of the direction. I think you've really taken from what we discussed, some of the positives of both, and put them together. I'm sure there will be people who want a little more and people who want a little less. Do you have any close-up of the bridge? We had a lot of discussion about the different
Yeah,
opportunities
we
for
could zoom
bridge.
in on this section. It's, this is really taken, the design character is taken from the Lazy Glen Bridge that was
So
recently
it's
installed.
gonna be a very basic, simple, not a lot of
Really
frills.
simple, yeah.
Okay. I appreciate that, and I think having a crossing for view planes and also for access to both sides, I think that's a great idea. I think restoration of the vegetation that has obviously been abused in some places along there. I mean, if you walk down there, you can see it. But I think just getting it up and going, I think the community's very excited. And when you talked about the sandwich eaters, I thought that was like a new term for crashing kayakers. Get my lunch, you know? So, yeah, but there's a lot of people who do. They just, whether there's activity in the river or not, they just want to be on the river. I think we all do. What a better place to spend your lunch hour, or your dinner hour, or breakfast. So that's kind of my brief direction to just get the conversation started.
Awesome, thank you.
George?
So I think, there's a lot to this, seriously.
Yes.
It's sort of like, your Christmas list. Everybody wants, sort of their ideal version of it, but the reality is just trying to,
George, Mike?
Like,
the reality is trying to come up with a budget that's workable and decide how this is going to be funded, looking at grant opportunities and GoCo cycles. So, funding is going to be a huge challenge to get this done. And so phasing, you do some little things. You can look at grants, but in terms of trying to do all this, once reality sets in and you see what that number is, I think it's going to sort of take a step back and try to do some long-range planning.
So I'm so excited to see the iteration of all the different versions that we've looked at, and this has really captured many of the qualities of water destinations, and that's an important aspect for the town of Basalt, is for the town of Basalt to claim itself as a water destination. And so it's really exciting to partner with Pitkin County on this. I do have the same financial questions of what do each of these cost, and when it comes down to it, I find that what is going to be money well spent will likely be the bathrooms. That could be a great asset. The bridge is a great asset for crossing from one side to another. Bridges are expensive, but nonetheless, all of them add to what qualities make it a great water destination. And so, yeah, I think we're on the right path, and I'm curious to see what grants, et cetera.
awesome.
Yeah.
Anyone else? I got one. Looking at this, I agree with George and others about trying to figure out the cost for all this, because that's one thing we really haven't discussed between the council and the commissioners, is how we're gonna pay for all of this and how the town and the county is gonna really partner going forward. So I do believe that's gonna be a really important conversation to have sooner than later. I do agree that we need to get the safety improvements going first, the parking, safety, public access, you know, I concern also about how does this park interact with our other parks? Because we do have another park with nature play areas and everything else just down the river. How many of those do you need going down? And those are ways you can potentially save some money, is to make sure that this park is not duplicating other things that are in other parks. And then the big one is we really gotta talk about how this gets maintained in the future. Maintenance is a huge, huge amount, especially if you're looking at crusher fine trails and boardwalk trails and bridges and bathrooms and parking areas and all that stuff. Maintenance is going to be a big, big concern. And, you know, who takes that and how is that gonna be funded in the future? And that can come around to the funding overall for this project is based on who's gonna maintain this stuff, is how far do we wanna go with the construction of certain elements and stuff. And then, you know, future, if we build that bridge, you know, who's gonna be responsible for the maintenance of that bridge over time? So we just get that out of the way earlier. Eventually, it'll need to be replaced or redecked or anything else. Let's make sure that those get outlined. Because really, truly, this, you know, all along, you know, is a collaboration between the town and the county on something that's a huge win for the community. And it's a huge win for Basalt. It's a huge win for Picken County residents who want to kayak. So between the two communities, this could be a huge thing. I saw it I drove by it right now, and Colorado Rocky Mountain School was out, you know, using it, and
In the rain.
in the rain. So I believe that, you know, this is really, if we can keep this, and then how do we continue this on? If this is really successful, how do we look through the rest of Basalt to get this going, to keep people moving and getting people more into town, making sure that connection happens? So, anyway, Bill?
I guess I just want to say thank you guys for helping us capitalize on a river asset that frankly is underutilized and underenjoyed. I mean, Basalt, for the two rivers that we have, has very, very little space that you can actually sit, enjoy, and participate with the river. I think it places a burden and an onus on us as the City Council in Basalt to integrate the river park, which is upriver from Old Town, with features that are downriver. And this, I think, frankly, is a challenge, but an incredible opportunity to bring the river into the Old Town much more than it already is for walkers and hikers or bird watchers or others. In terms of features, we were up in Redstone the other day, and Redstone, frankly, has more usable river frontage than we do at this particular point. And they do have a bridge, which is one of those features that's just cool, expensive, but cool. The other experience, and I've talked about this a little bit, was the experience of Buena Vista. We just stopped down there last week, and they began with a similar river park that was the anchor for what has now become a profoundly persuasive development that has spawned a community that has mixed-use commercial and residential, that now has the most incredible boutique hotel that certainly exists over on that side, but outside of Aspen, we were blown away. And it just provides that kind of framework for community development, and I have to say, the revitalization and the reinvigoration of Midland that I heard about during the entire campaign period this spring. So thanks for lighting the fire, providing the impetus, and hopefully we can continue to capitalize on this in ways that will really make this, as Jen said, a destination. You know, come here for things that are river focused.
Thanks, Steve.
Probably the most popular part of the river for Basalt that I have observed is the very bottom of the Frying Pan River, where there's the little beach next to the 7-Eleven.
Right.
No money was put into it. It's highly popular, highly usable for pedestrians. You get up to the river, the Whitewater Park, the way it is, and it's mostly for people actually being in the river, doing the water sports. You can spectate for a while, but then if you're just a pedestrian, you'd want to do something else. So if the pedestrian bridge did go over the river and got into the riparian section of woods over there and had maybe a little picnic kind of areas and placed little trails that people could explore, that would really add a nice element for pedestrians to do something. If there could be somehow a little beach put in on that other side of the river too, from Two Rivers Road on the highway side, then that could kind of mimic the lower part of the Frying Pan River that's so popular.
Thank you.
Greg?
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw this. So we talked about it on Healthy Rivers years ago, and I know we've seen it, we've opened it, but I had no idea this is where it was going. It's kind of interesting to see this. First impressions, just looking at it, is I'm concerned about, you know, those very rare 1983, 84 river levels and low bridges. You've got to put the bridge height high enough that a boater at high water can get underneath the bridge safely. And this illustration makes it look as if the bridge might be at water level, and I know that's probably not accurate, but something to be concerned about. I tend to want to, you know, the thing that intrigues me most about it in this whole area when I wander through there is that it doesn't look developed in any way. It doesn't look like the human hand has come in and designed anything. And I would encourage you to go maybe simply, at least for at the start, try to give it that sense where people can go in and think they're discovering something in nature rather than a developed path with, you know, planned trails and all that. And it's almost like the unintentional trails that we find in the woods that really weren't planned but somehow make sense. And I think that that's a design criteria that really appeals to me, because we're losing more and more of that as we develop these areas. Somebody mentioned birds and bird watching and, you know, connecting with nature. That would be a high priority for me. Maybe it's on the west side. Maybe that gets developed more slowly. I love the idea of a bridge, but how can we do it so it just, maybe this doesn't all have to happen in phases within a short period of time, but can happen over time as the demand increases. I could see maybe the river roadside demand will be higher sooner, and eventually as the need comes up, the other side slowly gets improved a little bit. I certainly love the idea of kids playing out there in the woods and discovering things, and but hopefully it's not a playground, and hopefully it's more of a woodsy experience.
Well, we also, I mean, one of the things about the other side is we have a trail now that's very not heavily used, and it's kind of a really cool area to go through because it's kind of bushwhacking through a pretty nice riparian area. Yes, this area is pretty hammered, but we just need to be conscious about how much development, how much trails, how much stuff we're going to put in these riparian areas. But, you know, taking advantage of that Ponderosa area, I mean, most of that area has a trail running through it.
Right.
And trying to connect that. And I think if you get people in it, they'll start learning how to respect it. And because in the past, they created bike parks and all these other things, and trying to find ways to get people into areas that were pretty neglected and pretty much impacted would be something big. And then you can tie that in with the existing trails, and maybe we can get more use on that a little bit, but it really is a nature play area. And I think, you know, connecting the schools to that would be a huge piece, because I think
Perfect location.
you can't beat this location.
And we have to remember that 40 years ago, there were old, you know, car relics there holding up the banks, the riprap, something called Cadillac riprap.
Still a few.
And there are probably still a few there. Like, you know, it really has been over the years. I know it's not a pristine place. You know, it's something that needs some work. But,
Well, I'm going to kind of, oh, sorry, but because I'm just kind of watching the clock for us.
Yeah. One quick one is, again, with the redundancy of what Gary brought up of how there are other parks, but also from an educational standpoint, recognizing that the Roaring Fork Conservancy does have a river and water experience education with bathrooms, with infrastructure, and that's walking distance to the schools as well.
Liza was on the stakeholder group, so she
had a lot of great input on
So
that.
kind of what I'm hearing, if you don't mind me jumping in,
Go ahead.
is that we're looking at phasing based on cost, so, and starting with the public safety issues, parking lot, restrooms, those kind of amenities, getting that kicked in, and then seeing what the cost for that would be, and funding mechanisms, grants, opportunities, joint ventures, fundraise, whatever we need to do. And then looking further down, didn't hear which side, but I'm kind of thinking people are thinking, develop this side where the Fisherman's Park is on that side, and then eventually move it over with the
South
bridge
side.
to the other side of the river. So it makes sense with your phasing, so you're not putting in the other side of the river and forgetting the bridge, because the bridge will be expensive. But looking at that further down the line,
And we just, on
and the
that,
long-term maintenance issues that Gary brought
Yeah.
up is another thing that should be part of the discussion.
well, and if you wanna go for GOCO, we gotta get these things going if you wanna go this year.
Yep.
Because otherwise you'll have to wait all the way to next year.
And create the
Because
partnership.
August is
Yep.
usually that area,
Yeah.
August, July, August, September.
Yeah.
One note would be, I see this and I want it all, and I want it now. It's
You
awesome.
sound like a kid.
And what I don't want is 10 years from now, it's like, yeah, there's gonna be a bridge in there one day. And so what I would like is to look at it from the get-go and say, this is what X is gonna cost, this is what Y is gonna cost.
Okay.
I'm hearing, let's get the bathrooms in. I bet the bathrooms are really expensive. And if we get to a value engineering kind of point, it might be that we don't have any bathrooms there.
It'd be great to get the cost if we were to put that in the first phase and say, okay, I'd rather do this than spend $60,000 on a new bathroom and changing area.
Yeah.
But then I don't know where that weighed in with the public either. Did the public say, hey, I want a place to change my clothes before I'm worried about a bridge?
Right. Anyway,
That's a
I
good
would
point.
love to move fast and get some stuff done, but I'd also happily look at, okay, what do we have to cut back and to make it possible?
What makes sense financially, so we have some of the amenities. The public safety for me, Auden, because we did, when we were moving forward, did promise the Basalt Police Department and the first responders down here that we would be really seriously paying attention to public safety. And
Yeah,
I think
there's a
that's
few
important.
pieces. Yeah, there's a few pieces there. So anything else?
Auden would agree with me, kayakers don't use changing rooms, they just drop right on the side of the road.
Yeah, but we might have a
That's
lot
not
of,
on the salt.
it's Basalt, so.
But I guess, Patty, what kind of order of magnitude are we talking about? I mean, are we talking millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions? I mean,
Millions,
that's what I would guess.
and I'm not gonna say,
I think we should
How many
get
of
the
them?
costs and
Right.
really move, with the phasing, just,
then we can,
let's look at the roadside phasing, but also include the other costs in there.
Oh.
And then you can start
Oh.
picking away.
I thought we were having
Right,
a
because
lightning
we'll have to
storm.
And then you can
determine.
begin targeting your sources of funds.
Yeah, but like he said, the GOCO grants are coming up, and so we gotta have
Well, we gotta
at
keep
least a
moving.
first phase with the numbers and the support, and going in as a joint venture. GOCO loves it when we can, and bringing in Eagle County, it would be great too.
Typically, Gary, even with GOCO funds, they're looking for matching funds. So, we've got healthy rivers and streams that we can look for some budgeting, but I'm really looking for the town of Basalt to really come strong to the table with your funding, because our initial commitment was in-stream amenities, and then we were going to look at opportunities, but we were not going to bear the brunt of those costs for out-of-stream amenities.
Right, well, and it's one of those things, the point is, I love that we're coming together now. I wish we came together a long time ago to start really discussing how we're gonna fund this long-term, because, we do have other priorities on that. So I think we can come strong, and Ryan had his hand up, but I really believe that if we were collaborating early on, we could have kind of figured out which side's gonna fund what, and what's gonna fund that. I love it that we're doing stakeholder groups now and coming with that, but, that's one of those things where we do need to figure that piece out, so. And Ryan, did you wanna?
Hi, good evening. I think I know most of you. Ryan Mahoney, I'm the town manager. And to your point, the town did budget funds this year, and some of that came out of post-funding, I believe it was, that would go towards more park-type amenities, and then also some of the road funds, with the thought that the Two Rivers Road side of the improvements would likely be the first ones to go, because that would address the public safety piece, it would address pedestrian, and then some of our goals with, improving the roadside amenities choking down the traffic, slowing it down a little bit, and just making it altogether safer in that area. So we do have that money funded, whether that goes towards matching for some GOCO funding, or we're able to get started and kick off with some things in advance of GOCO funding, and then having to relook at that in the 2019 budget. But my impression was that the town council was supportive of that in our 2018 budget, so.
We are ready to go to,
All right, now we're taking our field trip?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Great, thank you very much.
That's it.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Picken County. This is awesome.
So you guys all coming, you're coming up for the
Yeah.
ribbon cutting?
Cool. Welcome, everyone, to the Basalt Town Council meeting. I am your mayor for the evening, and for Basalt Town Council, and we need to do roll call for Pam.
Okay, 6:29, sir. And roll call, Jackie Whitsitt. Gary Tenenbaum,
Here.
Phil Infante,
Here?
Katie Schwer. Here. Auden Schendler,
Here.
Jennifer Riffle,
Present.
Ryan Slack.
Okay, and I think you gave me a cheat sheet of everything I have to do. So I need to thank Grassroots for being here and broadcasting our meeting live. People can watch tonight's meeting live and view previous council meetings online through the Community Government TV at www.grassrootstv.org. And our videographer this evening is Katie. Hi, Katie. So tomorrow, obviously, with Jackie not in town, the mayor's coffee has been canceled. We'll do it again when she gets back. Okay. So I'd love to start the meeting with our lovely statement, if anyone would like to make that statement.
Someone without food in their mouths.
Okay, Ryan, thank you.
Basalt is an inclusive, sustainable mountain community that boasts both historic charm and progressive vision. It is an engaging place to live, work, play, while offering an abundance of creative, professional, educational, and recreational outlets.
Thank you, Ryan. Okay, so the next up is the consent agenda, which is the minutes of May 8th. It's a special event activity permit, Motors on Midlands. And then there's a continuation to June 12th, 2018, public hearing and first reading of ordinance number 11, series of 2018.
Mayor, I move that the town council approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thanks. And next is the call to the public. And so first, we'd love to have anyone who has a positive comment and gratitude about Basalt. If anyone has a positive comment, and I always look to Bennett because he's just sitting there, but if anyone has a positive, and Bennett, you don't have to come up, but if anyone has a positive comment about Basalt, please come up at this time and make that comment. Anyone?
Make a suggestion comment?
If you make a suggestion comment, if you can come to the microphone.
Thank you, Gary. Good evening, everybody. Some of you may recall a couple of years ago when I saw an issue here in the park that our disabled citizens could not access the park, particularly for our events. I came to this council and you were very quick to make a very easy decision to put a ramp in next to the entrance to Art Base so that those members of the community who are not able-bodied citizens were able to now access the park for concerts and things of that sort. I'm bringing to your attention tonight another issue that I'm concerned about, and that is over by Ponderosa Park by the Valero station. We have a sidewalk that suddenly ends, it terminates. And what we have done is we've placed 10 giant boulders there, almost as if to hinder anybody who wants to walk that sidewalk in front of Ponderosa Park and go to Subway or the Valero station or Pitkin County. In fact, I was talking to our friend Asaf Dory, who some of you saw at the event this evening, and Asaf said it's not a problem. He simply hops off the sidewalk there into the street, and the message we're sending to our public is, sure, just walk out into a street where we have cars going to Valero, we have cars going to Pitkin, we have cars going to Subway, we have cars going to Ho Palace. And I'm asking council to give some consideration to simply finishing that stretch of sidewalk, which couldn't be more than maybe 10 yards. And again, I think that's an accommodation we should make not only for all of our citizens to be able to walk from one location to the other without having to go into the front of traffic. So again, I think it's a good thing, and I hope you'll give that some consideration. Thank you very much.
If I can just quickly respond to that, that's definitely a project that's on staff's radar and something that Public Works Director was contemplating for this year. And depending upon where our funds fall out, it's still a project that could possibly be completed this year. The rocks that were placed there, of course, were not placed there to obstruct people from walking on it, but we were having parking issues all along there, as you might imagine. And so that was put there as a stopgap. So that wouldn't be a permanent situation, and I think once the sidewalk goes in, then we can look at getting those boulders out, I would think. So just as a quick response, though the one thing is the cost, while it does not seem like it would be very much, just based on the length, it is up there somewhere in the, I believe $20,000 to $40,000 range, just to prep the ground and lay the concrete. And it's also a very small project, so often we get some challenges with actually getting a contractor to come in. So we'll have to find gaps in their schedules, but definitely something that we'll be looking at, and I'll reiterate that to Boyd.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, wait,
I have a positive comment.
oh, you have a positive, cool, okay,
Yeah.
give one.
I am very grateful for our public works. This spring, our turf is looking very prime, very green and lush. Last year was a challenging year, and this year they have really come back, and it looks fantastic.
Cool.
And I'd add, they did a great job with the Frying Pan Road, clearing the debris
Rocks.
along the edge of the road there, just last week.
These are so positive, who else? If the public doesn't have them, we have them, this is great.
Yeah.
All right, Chris. I didn't see you back there for a second, sorry. I saw Bennett, Bennett was just like, yeah.
For anyone watching, Chris Matera, Basalt Chamber of Commerce. I just want to say thank you to everyone who helped us produce the new Discover Basalt magazine. This is our annual magazine that the Chamber puts out. We got a lot of help from people in the community, but especially town staff, as I was verifying information and making sure everything was accurate. We had the right phone numbers and hopefully a helpful cheat sheet of at least one page of important numbers you can rip out and stick on your fridge. So this was a community effort, so thank you very much, and if you have a chance, go read it. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to address the council that are for items not on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll bring it to mayor and council reports, comments. Anyone?
I will report and disclose that I was approached by telephone by Tim Belinsky regarding the application on the Roaring Fork River parcel, or on the RFCDC parcel, and I declined any communication regarding that.
Okay. Any other council comments or reports?
I have a similar comment to Jen. I was just approached via email and also declined.
Okay. Anyone else? Cool. Manager's report.
Couple things for you all. The first thing I wanted to just make sure I introduced Lisa Nieslanik. I believe most of you know her already, but she is standing in as our interim finance director, and so I've asked her to attend the meeting this evening, just in case there were some questions, but wanted you guys also to put a name to a face. So she's been doing a great job for us so far, and didn't mean to put her on the spot, but wanted to make sure everybody got to say hi. Another quick, if you get a chance, go to the website. So the new website has launched. It's basically a facelift with new organization to it. One of the things that we knew was going to happen with it, as we, in the last several weeks while the new page was underway, we were adding things. Those were going to drop off when this new one came on. And so we'll have to go back and start systematically adding some of those items. But I wanted to make sure I thanked Pam for that. She took the charge, and I think she did a great job. And it was really a collaborative effort among staff to try to put all of our heads together with all the different departments to make sure things got cleaned up and put into order. So thank you for that. The top 12 priorities list that we've been talking about, one of the mayor, Jackie's goals, was to get that list up on the wall, which it's now, as of today, on the wall. There's not detail with it because it would have been, the writing would have been too darn small. So we have put the detail that accompanies that onto the website. In case you want to go look at that in greater detail, or the public does, since all of you have the the work plan. And of course, this is the first step to be followed soon by doing our strategic framework that we've been discussing as council and staff, which will end up complementing that. East Two Rivers Road, that water line that went through there and dug up some of the pavement, that pavement has been replaced and is back in good shape. We're underway with the contract that you all had approved at the last meeting with Grand River, and they have started with crack sealing. So they're going around and doing crack sealing, letting it cure, and in a couple streets around town, they'll be doing some chip sealing, and then, of course, some mill and overlay with fresh asphalt in a few other locations, but that will be a little bit later. But we're making sure we get the word out, both with our message boards. We're putting it on the website, putting it in the newspaper, as well as informing people locally. So I think they're doing a good job with making sure we get the word out there. And the final thing I have is the bears are out. There's a mama and 2 cubs around. One of them hit a trash can last night, so we made sure we put the word to keep that locked. It was a multi-tenant type of trash can. But the police have started their sort of annual routine of informing people, but we want to make sure that those bears stay safe, so keep your trash put away. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay. So next up was a presentation, but Janice is not feeling well tonight, so she'll come back on another night. I'm sure you're watching Janet feel better, and so hopefully she does feel better and comes back to present on changes to the election laws. And next up is the board and council appointments. And so this is something we do, you know, every time there's an election, to really make sure that all our appointed boards, all our boards' appointments are filled. And so, you know, tonight, where there's a few that Bernie and Mark were serving on, but there's also a recheck-in on those boards to make sure everybody is okay with who's on those boards, and maybe somebody will find out they actually volunteered for a board that they didn't know about. So the mayor pro tem, you guys did that last time, and that's why I'm sitting here today. And the next up was the Rudai Water and Power Authority. And, you know, this is one thing where this is a pretty important position for the town, since Rudai Water and Power Authority, you know, it's obviously the dam, and really learning about how, you know, the dam operates and the river flows from that dam. So, you know, to me, this is a good one. Ryan Slack has volunteered to sit on this one. So we'll, you know, I'd be happy to appoint him, but I just wanted to take any comments or see if anyone else wanted to potentially sit on the Rudai Water and Power.
I don't think he's qualified.
You want to respond to that?
No.
Okay, is everyone good with that?
Support the nomination or
Okay.
applaud his
Do you
volunteering.
want us to make motions on each of these?
I think you could do one at the end.
Okay.
Is how kind of we've done it in the past.
Okay.
Once there's a kind of a consensus.
Cool. Okay, so the next up is the Rolling Fork Transit Station's RAFTA. Jackie's been our representative as the mayor for a really long time. She would like to remain that. But the alternate for RAFTA has, Bernie was the alternate, and if somebody else would like to volunteer for that, we need representation on that, and if Jackie's not around, or even if Jackie's around, it's sometimes nice to have 2 Basalt Council people going at one time. Other jurisdictions have that too. So I didn't know if anyone, I'm not looking at anyone in particular. It's just, if anyone would like to nominate or volunteer for this one, it is once a month, and it's 2 Thursdays at 8:30, usually in Carbondale. It's once a month, the second Thursday. So anyone want to be the alternate? Auden? Bill?
I'll put it out there of, I would like to be the alternate for RAFTA if someone wants to take, does anyone want to switch? And I'm talking, 8:30 in the morning kind of meetings, and BEMC is an 8:30 meeting, and BEMC only meets once every 2 months.
Sorry, what are you trading for?
BMC?
Basalt Emergency Management Committee, being the representative on that, and I will be the Roaring Fork, the RAFTA alternate.
I'll trade with you.
Thank you, Katie.
I have nothing to trade.
Okay.
Is everyone good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Sweet, we got 2 things done. Next up is Roaring Fork Conservancy. Jackie's been on it as the mayor. She wants to stay, so I think we're good with that. The Board of Zoning Adjustment. Can one of you two explain that one?
Well, this has been more practice than anything. The code actually allows the council to be an alternate, and there's a first alternate and a second alternate. We haven't used BOZA very much because our code has very strict standards about what a variance is. So if we have a variance, we actually have to call a board. So it's just been kind of our practice when we do this exercise after the meeting to appoint a town council member. The practice has been to have Bernie, like I said, a couple council members. It was Bernie and Mark.
So this one.
This is one, if you didn't want to appoint someone right now, we could appoint one when there was a variance, but it's nice to have something.
When was the last time BOZA got together?
It's been a couple years.
What a terrible acronym. BOZA? Bozo?
I nominate Auden.
That's appropriate.
Right?
If you need a placeholder.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'd be glad to throw my name out there for it as well.
1 and 2.
I mean, I kind of hope to convene it just so we can learn about zoning.
I mean, we can come in and explain what they do.
Okay,
Yep.
that'd be great.
So
on
one,
to
two,
no.
yep.
Okay, cool.
Congratulations.
Taking notes.
The next one is the Victims and Witness Law Assistance and Law Enforcement Board, the Vail Board. I have to give Greg a lot of credit because this board has been, I didn't know, I volunteered for this board back 4 years ago. And Greg has finally gotten this board going again, and we got 2 local community members involved, and it's to me, it's a really important piece because the town, part of their tickets, they get money to help victims of crimes. And, we just haven't, how much money do we have in that account? $62,000. So there's a decent amount of money in this for victims assistance. So Greg has really got this going again. I think Jackie and I were happy to continue serving if everybody was okay with that. The next one we already did. The Basalt Child Care Coalition. So this is, we're gonna hear from them tonight, but the Child Care Coalition is, basically they are the ones who make recommendations on town funding for child care recommendations. This board has been going since 2006, and, I've sat on it for a really long time. I would love to have an alternate to help me on that because they do like to meet in the middle of the day, and, it's not always so easy for me to get back down to Basalt to do, but I did talk to Ryan about if he wanted to potentially be the alternate. I'm happy to continue to do it. I just would love to have somebody else because it's really important for them to have a council person at the meetings to really discuss, because what you'll hear tonight is there's significant things happening between Eagle County and the town and early child care, and so it would be great to have an alternate. Cool.
Sign me up.
Awesome, everyone good with that? Cool. Northwest COG, it's really staff, and you guys are good with that? Do you want one of us to attend these meetings?
One of the issues is the meetings are out of the valley, often in Silverthorne. I think they just canceled one in Walden because they couldn't get people to show up. So it is quite a bit of travel to go to them. You can tune in or call in, and so it's fair to do it remotely. They do like to have an elected on there, but at the time, we didn't have the elected, so, I stuck myself as well as one of our other staffers, Watkins, in there. And so if somebody is interested in that, certainly feel free to volunteer, and we could.
I had expressed interest to Ryan earlier. Again.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, not, if they are tremendously far away in other parts of northwestern Colorado, it might be difficult to attend those meetings, but I would certainly be interested to attend the NWCOG meetings.
Yeah, so you can replace me.
Okay.
And Watkins will stay as the alternate. And what you can do is, if you choose, if you want to call in, great. We'll have Watkins as staff also call in as he has been. Often they're regional issues, some of which don't necessarily pertain to the Roaring Fork Valley or us.
Right.
But when they do, we like to gather that information and make sure we have.
That would be awesome.
No,
They have some good stuff on, like broadband and some economic development stuff.
Well, and just
There's some stuff I think
elevator
you'd be interested in.
from the experience of the municipal training that Ryan and I went to about 2 weeks, whatever it is now, it's probably 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was an awful lot of work that could be done in coordination across jurisdictions, and that's what I would hope to kind of contribute and learn.
That would be great, because we couldn't find anyone last time, and Watkins had no choice. He's the alternate, so. Yeah.
I think he enjoys listening.
Yeah.
He's smiling. It's okay. So, great. All right. Next up is core. And does anyone, Auden, you want to continue on that?
I'm on it, but if someone were really interested in it, they'd be welcome to do it. What? I can't.
Quiet. Crickets.
It's like you're still
You
on
want
it.
to continue? That would
Sure.
be great. Thank you. The Aspen Snowmass Nordic Council. Katie and I kind of decided on our own that she's going to be the alternate, but we'll just make that official. I used to go to all the meetings. I don't go to them all now, but it's kind of important to always have a Basalt voice, because sometimes they get very Aspen-centric, and it would be very nice always to have a Basalt voice there. So I would stay on, and then Katie could be the alternate, and we would decide who goes. That work for everyone? Cool? The green team,
Katie.
Auden, you want us to continue on the green team? Yeah,
That's good. I'm happy to. Yep.
okay, great. And then the Intermountain Regional Transportation Committee, we couldn't get anyone to do it because it's all the way in Eagle. And so I was okay with Ryan continuing to do it, but if anyone really had a burning desire to get on it, I didn't think so. So, Ryan, you're still there?
Okay.
You got off of one, so.
Yeah, that's great.
And then Bach. So, Jen, you want to continue on Bach?
I'm happy to, and if anyone is interested,
Yeah.
be happy to pass the torch as well.
I'm good. Anyone?
Meets Thursdays at 4:30.
Doesn't sound like it, so you're on.
Okay.
Sweet,
And
okay,
Gary, one other thing.
sure.
Well, I use the same list I had used 2 years ago, and it wasn't until this weekend I was working on something for Bill that Infante, that I noticed that I didn't have the Finance Committee on here. The Finance Committee was established in May of 2016. It appoints the mayor and then 2 other counselors for 2-year terms. So the appointments were Katie and Bernie. And then we amended the bylaws after that to have 2 citizens. And then last year, we appointed Ann Nickel. We haven't met at all in 2016. In fact, we had taken off the 18, sorry, thank you, Pam. So we had actually taken it off the web. Last year, we met about 4 different times, on the underpass, reviewing 2016 budget, purchasing the river park. It seems that there was one other subject. My gut feeling when I noticed that was that maybe it was part of a longer, a bigger discussion maybe when Jackie was back about what you want to do with that committee and how you want to formulate it. I didn't have it on this list, but again, if you were going to do something, the terms would, the Katie's term would actually be coming up. And then the mayor's automatically, an appointment.
Yeah. So we could appoint somebody and just get it whole again tonight, and then, figure out a schedule. And some of the ideas that, of course, I've thrown out to you all is it, do we have cause to meet as often as it's contemplated, or is it something we use during the budget cycle or during very specific, discussions on expenditures and the like? So that's certainly something that you guys can give me feedback on. But, for now, since it's still a committee, it was, left off unintentionally, so I think that we could go ahead. Bill has expressed interest in being on it. If Katie would be rolling off, Katie, would you be interested in staying on?
Unless someone else has a strong desire,
Okay.
I'll stay or I'll leave, whatever everyone wants to do.
Okay.
But I do suggest that we change the documents that have us meeting every second Wednesday of the month, because it's more of an as-needed committee.
It was formed in crisis, and
It
we
was.
don't need it as
Right.
frequently as we did at the time.
Yay.
It's a cool thing to have, because it's like a financial advisory board. It really helps, kind of formulate some of the budget decisions, so the whole council doesn't have to go through all the minutia of everything. So, to
I'm
me,
interested in it as well. And I have attended, I think, every budget.
Okay.
So since the bylaws don't allow it, should we do it as an alternate or something, and then re-amend
Katie
the
was happy to
bylaws to
give it.
do everything?
If you wanna take my place.
Katie, I would love to be your alternate. It would be my honor to be your alternate.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
Yeah,
are
or-
you still okay to?
I'll stay.
So if you stay, and then, pardon the interruption,
Sure.
so you won't technically be an alternate yet. We'd have to amend that, but we can bring that back, okay?
Or you could put 3 counselors on. I mean, if you're gonna amend it, you could you could do however you wanna do it.
Okay. Well, I think I'll leave that up to
No
you
problem.
guys, but Bill and Katie would be the members, and then, you'd figure out the alternate piece?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
And then there is one opening for a citizen that we would put out, and look for interest there. I know of one person that's potentially interested, so.
Okay, so,
One other one, Gary, it was mentioned on here that I have been attending the post committee meetings, and I would like to propose adding that to the guideline or being appointed to post. I feel that it's a very important committee that oversees a huge portion of the town of Basalt and Basalt finances. In addition to that, having attended many of the post meetings, it has been reflected, wow, it's really helpful to have a council member here with the citizen group. And so I'd just like to propose that.
well, and, I deal with post group a lot, and having an actual council person on it is not always the best thing, because you have much more power than any of them, and sometimes they defer to you. And so you would then have more power and not necessarily have the whole council doing that. So, I think we should bring that back to another meeting, discuss it as a whole council when Jackie's here too. But I do have pause on it because we try to appoint advisory committees and not always have council people on all those advisory groups. But I think that's a bigger discussion for a lot of our boards on that, Ryan.
And I was gonna propose, as far as it relates to the, all the committees that we have, all of you have expressed some interest in, hey, we've got all these committees. I came on at some point in time and was never fully educated on how they, how they got started and what their main functions are and who should attend and things like that. So I think as part of a retreat item, that would be a great topic to discuss, because I think we need to kind of do a longer discussion about that. And so we could do that. My intention was to look at that retreat in the next, month or two, and then bring it back for, ratification to this board of any changes that come out of that, if that's okay.
It's a tough one, because if you look at all of these, we're on some committees and we're not on some committees. Before we choose to do more, I think we need to really decide it, because I see it when I go to the Child Care Coalition. I try to be as quiet as possible, but they're always trying to get my opinion because, I'm on council. So it's a tough one.
Yeah.
So I think we should just talk about it as a bigger group discussion. I'm not against you attending those meetings. It's great because we have commissioners attend ours, and it's awesome for one of us or all of us to sit in on those things. So, okay.
Because Gary, I would like to just weigh in too. On the lists of committees, I mean, some of them are of greater or lesser interest to some of us, but those that I think I would certainly like to explore how the council is represented, either in an official capacity or as an ex officio member. And so the Finance Committee was at the top of my list, but the others that are associated with arts and culture, so BPAC. Education is something that I believe very strongly in. I would love to see us represented either formally or informally on Basalt Education Foundation, and or through the variety of the accountability mechanisms at the school level, so at the elementary, high school, and middle school. Those are once every 6 months, so frankly, it's not a particularly onerous task. And then finally, the last one was the Basalt Chamber of Commerce, because I think we have an interest as a council to work more with the business community to promote the interests of business, and one of the best ways to do that is by sitting as ex officio on the Basalt Chamber. And so I'd like to propose those as points for discussion and consideration in the future.
Okay. Well, I think we have a good discussion at our retreat.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good one, because we haven't really looked at that in a long time.
Well, and just one additional comment is that I think the more strategic alignment we can have with Post versus them being over there doing their thing is important, because everything we're doing is going to tie back into that. River Park was a perfect example.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I would argue that's a financial issue. Overseeing how we spend our discretionary and non-discretionary, or the restricted and the unrestricted, is the function of town council.
True.
So,
Well, that gets to the basic principle of these citizen boards. You want the citizens to participate, and you want to give them some power to do that. And you don't want council to necessarily have to be in all of them. So it's that balancing act of all of that. But it's a really good conversation, because, we need to look at that. Okay, so on the ones that we have I didn't write them all down. So
I've got them.
Yeah.
if you want to just say it, and then we can make a motion.
Sure, so, you want me to go for it, and then you can correct any ones? So Rudai Water Power and Authority is Ryan Slack. Roaring Fork Transit Agency will have Jackie and then Jen as alternate. The BOZA will have Auden and Bill.
Nope. Oh, yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, yes.
He's like, I'm not a bozo.
Yeah. Basalt Emergency Management will have Katie. The Basalt Child Care Coalition will continue with Gary, and then add Ryan Slack as an alternate. Northwest COG will kick me out and add Bill as regular, with Watkins remaining as an alternate. Aspen Snowmass Nordic is Gary, with Katie coming on as an alternate. And all others would stay the same. Oh, excuse me. Finance would be Bill and Katie, to be continued at a later discussion as to alternates and what we do with that, as well as we just discussed the post, and the other ones, but I think those don't get rolled into the.
Is there a motion?
I make a motion that we approve as listed.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Cool.
Thank you all.
Well, next up is the Basalt Child Care Coalition. It's an update, and options, and I'm gonna kick this one off, because I've been part of this Child Care Coalition for a really long time, since it basically started, and So you guys can start coming up as I'm talking, but, you know, this has been identified as a community need since 2006, as the town of Basalt has been funding in some way or shape or form, this child care coalition. And really, the coalition came together to try to address the needs of early child care in this community and capacity and, also the ability for families to afford child care. The reality is in our area, just like affordable housing, child care is extremely expensive. State licensing makes it even more expensive. And the reality is, without some type of help and funding, there's a lot of people out there who cannot afford to do childcare. When I first got on council in 2006, I was amazed, because my wife just got pregnant. I was absolutely blown away that I could not find a space for my kid. And I was blown away, and I was all of a sudden terrified of the thought, with 2 working parents, how are we going to do this? And luckily, I found a spot. But when I started talking to other parents, I'm an open space and trails person. And that was my big thing in 2006 is, no, they'll slow down the growth and care about trails. And childcare became one of the biggest issues for me because, first of all, it hit me at home, but all of a sudden I started to talk to a ton of parents who don't come to council meetings, who don't come and speak out, but they're all having problems. Getting infant care in this valley is extremely difficult and really unbelievably hard because you got to get on waiting lists. And as a mother who is ready to have a kid, who has it also a career, you're kind of like, whoa, what do you do? And as a family, you try to figure it out. And then I started looking at the costs, and 4 days of childcare cost me almost $11,000 a year. And that is, I didn't qualify for any assistance. However, I luckily got into one of the Aspen child cares, and there's a Kid First tax initiative up in Aspen, and they help subsidize everybody's, child care to make it more affordable. But when I started looking down here and started talking to the incredible people who do it here and all of the child care centers that are here, you start looking at it, you go, wow, we need to do more. And so it's been really great working with this group for the last 12 years. And, now we have Aspen Community Foundation involved, and we have all these other, we have Eagle County seriously thinking about and working with us and funding this at a pretty high level. And so it's made the difference in a lot of people's lives. There's another piece of this is affordability, and there's a lot of people in our community, all in this 3-mile planning area, that cannot afford it. So there's a lot of kids who don't go to early child care or preschool, and then they come to kindergarten completely unprepared. And it totally 100% takes away from all the other kids. And, trying to bridge that gap, I give Aspen Community Foundation a ton of credit. There's been private funders to help getting ready for kindergarten programs and stuff. We need to do more as a community, and so I'm going to leave it to these guys to take off on that. But it's been a passionate thing for me, and it's something I never thought I'd become passionate about, even though I don't need it anymore. My kid's in regular school, but I'm going to continue with this until we can really find a way to do some sustainable funding and getting the capacity in our area to a point where parents don't have to worry. Basalt is an incredible place. If you're a family moving here, childcare should just be available, and you should have it in every community. And that's why we pushed really hard with Stotts Mill to include it in Stotts Mill. So Southside had childcare. There's childcare in the Basalt area at the Basalt Elementary School. That's not final. With all the other growth that's happening here, those childcare spaces could be moved out over time for classrooms. Willits, all the years Willits has been there, and we'll talk about some of that tonight. Willits never had an approved childcare facility in Willits. That's one of the biggest population centers of Basalt, and we don't have that. So, I'll let them go, but I wanted to make a big push because this is something that I think really creates community, and I'll hand it off to you guys.
Well, thank you very much, Gary. That was an excellent introduction to this presentation, and Again, we are here looking for direction this evening. I'm Sarah Nadelny, I'm a staff planner, and I have some excellent Child Care Coalition members with me here tonight that will be speaking. We have Andy Davies from Aspen Community Foundation. Shirley Ritter is with the City of Aspen's Kids First. We have Dustin Anderson, he's with Peak Architecture, and here behind us we have Joni Goodwin with Early Childhood Network. And make sure we didn't have anyone else that snuck in. So we are going to be going through a bit of information tonight and throwing some ideas at you. So we're just asking if you could, if possible, if you can hold your questions until the end, unless you have a really burning comment to get out. Susan, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
No, might interrupt though, if we are moving fast enough, because what we're really here is to get some input and feedback from the town council, and we're not expecting to walk out of here maybe tonight with clear direction, but I think if we could get some, just like when we were listening to the Whitewater Park, if we could get some kind of high level discussion. So I would like to have the presentations done about 25 after. And so that we have like 20 minutes to have the council discussion. So with that.
Okay, thanks. Just to give a little bit of background, the Child Care Coalition was established in 2006. It's a partnership of nonprofits, early childhood educators, and staff from businesses and local and regional government entities. The goal of the coalition is to provide accessibility, affordability, quality, and of early childhood development in the Med Valley region, and we do this through providing and supporting tuition assistance to qualified families, health and dental screenings, connecting family with resources, trainings to families and to care providers, and quality improvements, amongst other things. And tonight we wanted to kind of introduce you to something that was a bit new to me. You might know this. This is the why, how, what way of thinking, also known as the Golden Triangle.
But we didn't make it gold.
Or a triangle.
I'm just going by what it says, but it's not a triangle, but it's called the Golden Triangle. We start with the why instead of starting with the what, which makes a big difference in how you get to your end. So the why is, why do we do it? What is the need? And so this is where we define our core beliefs towards an issue. The how is where we discuss our values, behaviors, and beliefs that guide our decision making. And the what portion of it is the need that we meet and the way that we meet it. So we're going to kind of start this off with discussion of the why. And I hand this over to Shirley.
So that's my part, and there are multiple answers to the why. So the first part is that early childhood education and young children are one of the best investments that you can make. Everyone has a role: families, government, business, philanthropy. This is in part an economic issue, and it's in part a child development issue. Studies show that investments early in a child's life and in quality early childhood education specifically gives the child the best chance of a strong developmental path emotionally, intellectually, socially. This all happens in partnerships with families that are supported. Today's children are tomorrow's parents, neighbors, business people, workforce, and maybe town council members. It's also our experience that during the first years of life, literally your brain is wired and shaped, the architecture laying the foundation for future learning, earning, mental and physical health, determining whether our stress management system responds appropriately to real or perceived threats. This is why safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments are among the most powerful and protective forces in a young child's life. So more specifically, areas such as Willits, Gary mentioned this a little bit, have seen a significant increase in families with young children. More is anticipated. Families report having left the Aspen area to find more affordable housing options to allow them to start families. It's well known that the Roaring Fork Valley is having a child care crisis. If you're a young family, having had a baby, looked for child care, this is the fact. Within the town of Basalt's 3-mile planning area, there are spaces for 324 children currently enrolled in licensed child care programs.
This is enrolled. This is not the need. Programs still have long wait lists. There's been about a 30% increase since 2013, and Gary talked about that a little bit. That was spaces in the Red Brick, expansion in Carbondale with Little Blue from Blue Lake, some of the other ones that you are familiar with. But what you might not know is there is conservatively predicted to be yet an additional 30% increase in the next 5 years based on approved development that translates to families with young children. So that need is pretty quickly outstripping even given capacity or planned capacity. Families are really trying. They want to live here, they want to have good jobs, they want to be part of the community, but at best, they piecemeal together childcare options. Employers report feeling the strain of retaining employees who struggle to find reliable and affordable childcare and stay in this community after they have a baby. So we have a video with a mom who is at Alpine Bank and who is on our committee, explaining that a little bit more.
So because we don't have sound traveling through our thing, we're going to try to coordinate this. So maybe when I say 1, 2, 3, go, we can try to do this together.
And this might be like a foreign movie.
Right, right. So, okay, so let's go. 3, 2, 1, go.
Hi, I'm Jenny Sauer. I'm with Alpine Bank here in Basalt, and I'm speaking today to the difficulty of not only staffing and hiring eligible employees in today's market, but also in keeping them as they deal with growing families. And as we have seen that here, we've lost, I would say, 1 person per year due to the birth of a child in the family and their inability to balance all of that and continue to work. So for most people here, it seems to make more sense to either relocate or to, well, often both relocate and have one parent stay at home, which you know, costs us a lot in training and developing and finding new staff to fill those positions, and also in morale, as far as, you know, what is it that people are expected to do when they have a family and they're in a position that doesn't pay enough to cover the cost of childcare in our valley here. So that is if in fact they can get in, as we all know that there's been quite a bit of difficulty and very long wait lists in order to even be eligible to pay the price they can't afford to have their child cared for. So I know many of you deal with this as employers, and I guess I'm just trying to speak to that difficulty, and the reason, one of the many reasons that I support the Basalt Child Care Coalition and our efforts to create more space and some more accessibility to the child care options in our valley. I thank you guys so much for your time and hope for some partnership in getting some of these things accomplished. Thanks so much.
So thank you for that. And we'll turn it over to Andy for a discussion of funding and partnership.
Hi, so I'm Andy Davies, and I'm the Cradle Superior Director for the Aspen Community Foundation and active member on the Basalt Child Care Coalition. And I wanted to take a bit of your time to show, well, A, thank you for the support that the town of Basalt has given to assisting families and to our child care providers, because anyone who spent 5 seconds looking at child care as a business realizes it's a labor of love, and it is not a money-making machine by any stretch of the imagination. So all of your support is really, we're really grateful for it. But we do have numerous people that are providing support in this area, in the Basalt area, to help with a comprehensive approach to child development. So we've talked a little bit about child care centers and capacity and the high cost of tuition, but we also have to look at how do we support parents and the adults who are working with children, because as Shirley indicated, the level of brain development that is happening between 0 and 5 or 8, depending on wherever you want, that maybe comes to fruition by 25. But those first 5 years really set the stage, and we do know that a lot of children who do not have quality experiences are really starting in a hole. So they don't have the executive functioning, they don't have the emotional regulation, and they have a very difficult time being successful. So these are the logos of a number of funding sources. I do want to point out, Gary had mentioned the partnership with Eagle County. For the last 2 years, Eagle County has supported early child care through and asked the coalition to put together a comprehensive work plan to the tune of $180,000 last year and $200,000 this year to augment a comprehensive approach. So what we're trying to look at is a very complex problem with multiple issues, but looking at solutions that are systems and addressing the multifaceted complexities that we're dealing with. And that's really what we're doing. We have great partnerships with the Roaring Fork School District, Kids First and Early Childhood Network. Valley Settlement is spending a lot of energy with some of our most vulnerable families and our most vulnerable children and really supporting them as well. But these are all program supports. And I want to, and right now these are sort of on life support, and they're not necessarily reliable every single year. So every year we have to look and see what kind of tuition assistance might be available for families. And as you all had heard Jenny talk about and Gary talk about, that's very anxiety inducing for a lot of families when they're waiting in December to see if they would get some funding. And so we're looking at sort of a dual track. One thing that we are working on very closely with a number of partners throughout the area is the possibility of a sustainable funding stream, much like Kids First has up in Aspen, to offset some of these tuition assistance and quality improvement programs. And we're really excited about some possibilities with that. However, we also need to be addressing the capacity issue, and that's really where the work tonight is, and that is some opportunity to increase the capacity so that when we are successful in coming up with sustainable funding, that we will have places for which we can use sustainable funding for tuition assistance to help families. And that's really what we want to talk to you about today.
Thank you. So we've covered, the why and the how of this, and we're moving on to the what. And the what is the proposal to meet our defined need, which is capacity at the moment. Child Care Coalition is broadening our focus from just childcare to that early childhood development, as Shirley and Andy both alluded to. This is a more holistic approach. It addresses the physical, emotional, and cognitive health and well-being that starts at infancy, as well as providing outreach and support to the educators and the parents. Ideally, an early childhood development center would include classrooms, a gross motor room, office and staff rooms and kitchens, as well as a larger community room. The community use room could be used for health screenings and other intervention services, trainings and meetings for both staffs and families. It could be an education classroom with observation opportunities to use by local students. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dustin and hand this off to you so you can talk about the potential for development, and if you need to.
Which one's going forward?
This one goes forward, and this one is the red dot, in case you want to show where it is.
She's even letting you drive.
Thank you.
Well, this one, and it's touchy, just, yeah.
Hi, I'm Dustin Anderson with Peak Architecture. I've been with the Basalt Child Care Coalition for a couple years now. Back in 2016, in the summer, we kicked off some ideas. Funding wasn't quite there yet to support. This past December, conversations struck up again, put some funding initiative together. That was secured, so I've been spending a portion of my spring working up some ideas with Parcel 2E. So over here on the Willits, sorry, I'm a little shaky there. So Parcel 2E is at the southeast corner of Lewis Lane and Willits Lane. So it's right in between. It's a transition zone, if you will, between Cypress Meadows to the south and Willits Town Center to the north. So we kind of have a step up from single family all the way to a mixed use building size there. So this is somewhat of a transition. So most of what we're looking at today is a one-story potentially a story and a half or two for certain elements, and the last will be a little bit different. So that's portion of the variables. Classrooms is also another consideration. Multi-purpose space, we did want to show an option without, as well as the affordable housing, there's an option without. So there were a couple drivers with the design element through coordination with the Basalt Child Care Coalition, the professionals, and caregivers. We determined that 6 is a good baseline number to support a successful program. Parking requirements were still held by the municipal code for developing, so we're trying to be aware of that and to try to take care of as much, or refrain from mitigation as much as possible. Fire district also, I've met with them to go through the general site plan, and that really shaped where the building lies. If we look at the, we'll get to that in a second. And also the Colorado Shines. This is a higher degree of standard than what the state of Colorado requires for childcare as far as the provider. So this is something that helps for additional funding as we've been discussing.
It's touching.
Okay, so I'll be over here. So the intersection, we got Willits and Lewis Lane. For the most part, the footprint changes slightly to adjust to each program difference. So option 1 is a 12,500 square foot footprint, hosting seven classrooms. The projected enrollment may be somewhere in the range of 90 to 100 students per day. This is not a total how many people are in the program, but actually how many children are there physically in one day. Also, common with all 3 is a large gross motor room in the center. Instead of having a hallway circulation, we thought that it'd be better to have a nice large space in the middle that's tall and bright to let daylight in, and also provide ample space for play. But more so, most programs elect to have after-school care to pick up a little additional income, because those students are only there for a couple hours after school. So that could boost enrollment by 22 or 33 or so, depending on what the unmet need is. Also common is turnaround for fire, since this is the length of this road. Also another fire lane, so fire lane access. The community room space is closer to the Willits, so kind of looking at the corner, looking at Willits, and then pushing the child care portion of the program more towards Willits Lane. Down at the south of the site, we have a wetland area that's platted, so that is that's to be untouched and preserved. Maybe an opportunity for some learning experience there as well. So with that, we have our play areas in on the south side where we get lots of sun, and I think that's got this. For this, budget-wise, still looking at very preliminary numbers. So as far as budget on this, looking at figures between 7.8, 8.5 million. The large number, or the number per square foot that we're assigning to this is somewhere around 500. We'll get to some of the other initiatives that the building is wanting, but we're trying to push to have what we're referring to as a net zero ready. building to where we're basically looking at a core and shell, super insulated, to be able to reduce our energy demand. Reducing it enough to where we can fit enough solar on the rooftop to help offset the power consumption.
So maybe instead of, maybe just because we're about 4
Time,
minutes behind so why don't we just go through like maybe the key items of each one and the pros and cons?
Okay.
Just,
Keep it moving along. Okay. So one other element was the kitchen, a small commercial kitchen that we wanted to throw in, not only to nourish the children in a program. There had been some collaborative discussion to support the commercial kitchen might be able to even support families by providing takeout meals. So over in the community room space, currently looking at about 1,500 net square feet, so that for tables would seat around 100. Parking on this site.
actually, why don't you, I think we're gonna just do a little bit.
Okay. So pros and cons for option one. Pros, large community space, allows for a variety of uses, creates a true child development center, having separated spaces for different uses at one time, and providing 7 classes, which was found ideal for flexibility, for bumping age groups up intermittently. One con, no affordable housing with this option. So option 2, much of the footprint is the same. It's still a 7 classroom. Kitchen moved, and then over on the east side, we've added a duplex and a single family residence. So see the floor plan. Pros and cons, provides family-oriented housing, good separation of uses, and still provides the 7 classrooms. Con, it lacks the multi-purpose community space, engaging the community on the property, and it eliminates opportunity to create the quote-unquote child development center, since it's more of a child care facility with on-site affordable housing. So option 3 is combining the ideas. Option 3 differs from the first 2 because it's a 2-story element on the Lewis Lane. So facing Willits Town Center, it'd be a 2-story element with affordable housing above. Still 1-story element facing south to single family. With the added program, we needed to facilitate egress, so elevator and stairs for circulation. And then for the upper level, 3 bedroom, and then 1 bedroom apiece. Helps out on a number of things, parking, but I think we tried to have a complementary mix of larger family size and also smaller. Pros and cons, combines child care affordable housing in a multi-use community space when building, addresses more community goals. Cons, we are compressing the design and the use on the site. Challenges to meet all the on-site parking. Building has slightly more massing, and in order to facilitate or lower the parking, we did lower the classroom from 7 to 6, and also more expensive with this option. So this option, as it was drawn, it's about 18,000 square feet gross, and I believe the pricing on that was somewhere in the 9.2, 9.8 million for construction.
So, remember, we're just early stages, but, just trying to identify, how can we pay for this? Town of Basalt, the two big pieces we were looking for the Town of Basalt in contribution is the land and our childcare impact fee that we've initiated in different land use approvals. The land we haven't had an appraisal, but the other appraisals that we've done for government space, even with land use restrictions, have been a fair amount of money. Impact fees, we have about $82,000 now with Willett's impact fees, and we have another 125 units in Willett's that will be paying impact fees. Probably the largest, the second one, Eagle County. We've been having conversations with Eagle County. Andy kind of mentioned these different efforts that have been kind of going on in terms of polling and looking at different funding. Eagle County's doing that right now. They are doing, they've hired the same consultant that RAFTA has been doing some polling, but they also, more importantly, they have existing reserves that they're thinking about drawing down for projects that really meet their goals. So we were thinking this project, particularly with the Child Development Center, because it gets at a lot of the issues that we haven't kind of tackled yet locally with childcare in terms of this health, education, having a site that other people that aren't taking their kids to childcare can come, and other activities would be a good use of that money. So if the council's receptive, that's the kind of discussions that we would take on. Further in-kind donations, what I call the Economic Roundtable has identified that, child care for their workers is a big issue. We're not really sure how this in-kind would work, but it's out there, just plain old fundraising. If we had, in the end, conveyed this to like a nonprofit, then like the USDA is a good loan source because they have very long, low-term interest loans. Growing Years had gotten a loan on their parcel, and it turned out that it was in the floodplain, and so they couldn't get that to go through. Grants, and that's another opportunity. Particularly, the easy one is playgrounds, but there's other funding sources. There's this rural philanthropy days, and there's a lot of folks that say that there's money kind of available there. Again, we haven't really deep dived into this because we're obviously just at the early stages. Sarah, what's our next kind of piece?
Well, can I just jump in on that?
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, I'd love you to explain what Parcel 2E is for some people who don't know, but secondly, one of the impetuses behind a lot of this is the fact that Jeannie McQueenie with other commissioners have been really coming over, and they understand some of the development impacts that they're gonna have with the development projects that have been approved. There's no childcare with some of those approvals. And so they want to find ways to partner with the town and spend some significant funds. And they have pretty large reserves right now, but, between that, they are also looking at a potential ballot initiative in Eagle County. I don't wanna, I wanna be able to say that because they are. They're looking at a ballot initiative in Eagle County for early childcare funding. And so, they have been, from the top, been very open to the funding piece, because the reality is it's a lot of money, but the Business Roundtable was something that I participated in, and it was basically started by businesses. Businesses came over to really try to find ways for their employees to get childcare funding. So, Dustin's per square foot cost, I mean, if a lot of these companies were construction companies, and so I think there's a big partnership, so I don't want us to get lost in the cost right now, or how big this thing could really be, because, the reality is that, we're gonna need it in the future. I just, I seen it, 30% increase, 30% increase. It's come to fruition even through recessions, so that'll be there. But if you could explain parcel 2E for people who don't know.
Sure, parcel 2E was part of the original kind of Cypress Meadows, Willits Town Center land use approvals, the annexation agreement, where they dedicated that parcel to the town of Basalt. So it has a restriction on it has to be used for government-related uses, and then there's a caveat that we can't use it for unsightly items such as storage of materials, or I think they're kind of alluding to kind of a public works type facility. So that's kind of what 2E is, and the town of Basalt owns it, so it is definitely an asset of the town of Basalt.
Can I ask for clarification on that? We talked about in there as far as, contributions from the different participating entities. Ours is a potential donation of the land. Do we have to maintain ownership of the land, or can it actually be, given to an entity that would be like a nonprofit or something like that?
The way that I read it, it doesn't have to be continued owned by the town of Basalt.
Okay.
And, what we've done on other parcels to date, we've sold parcels, like to RMI, we have sold parcels, bought them back, and sold them, the one for Conservancy, and then to CAW, we have a long-term lease and the River Center. So there's a lot of different ways I think this could partner out once you kind of put your, pencil to it.
Thanks.
So any other questions from councils or comments? Pardon?
So the affordable housing would be rental or for sale?
Rental.
Rental. Because that option was more expensive, but I would think that would generate income for the project over time, no?
I think it goes back to that same question that we haven't really gotten to yet, that conversation about, because there are lots of different options, the town could retain ownership and lease it both to the child care program and the rental spaces. There could be some joint sorts of ventures, but I think that's a bigger conversation about what works best for the town and for everybody involved, depending on which option is even chosen.
Right. So, yeah, my question is around, it seemed like in option 1 and 2, I was thinking, why don't you put some housing on top to accommodate either affordable housing or even free market to pay for the development itself. But my real question is, this is a duck that is trying to be a horse, in that it's a child care center. Why are we even talking about affordable housing? Is it a requirement of code or zoning, or?
Well, the way our code works is that you're presumed to have affordable housing obligation, and you can ask for a waiver. So, we've had, like the River Center, RMI, where we ended up with a deal. But, so we kind of start out that way, and
because to me, if there's a financial, hey, this is too expensive, let's make it bigger and have what we want, and the town could waive the affordable housing. I mean, we've been working on a lot of affordable housing, and we're trying to get childcare here. And that's just an option I'd be open to.
I would like to expand on that though, because I know for the child care facility my children go to, these people are driving from Rifle, Newcastle, Glenwood. It would be nice for them to be able to live where they were. Obviously, you couldn't staff everyone there, but I think it's something that I love options where people would go. I would promote going higher to match Willits at 3 stories, and really, once you're building that much, I mean, you can see from option 1 to option 3, you're looking at 1.4, 1.3 more million dollars. Yes, it's a lot of money, but I think you could recoup that cost if it was some affordable, some for profit.
Well, and also, Eagle County has 2 pots of money we could potentially take from too. They have the reserves, but they also have an affordable housing fund, and to my knowledge, and Susan can correct me, or Ryan can correct me if I'm wrong, they have never spent any of their affordable housing dollars in this Roaring Fork Valley. So correct me if I'm wrong, but if they haven't, this is a perfect opportunity for us to potentially tap some of that money for the affordable housing piece of this, tap their general fund for other pieces of it, and then really, truly, that's why the Aspen Community Foundation is here. There are private funders that are looking at ways to contribute to the community. Early childcare has been a big piece of funding for Aspen Community Foundation. That's why they're even at the table. They're getting private funding to help maintain, the studies that they're doing throughout the entire area. So I think there's two ways to do it, and I kind of agree with Ryan to, let's see if we can mix the two. I think there's another piece that we do have to watch is it's next to the residential neighborhood over there, so we're gonna hear from them eventually. So massing it too high, we're gonna hear from them, and we just gotta choose as a council how far we're gonna go. Anyone else?
First of all, I recognize that Eagle County, I worked with Jill Ryan regarding their last contemplation of the early childhood ballot initiative, and what was reflected by Eagle County is they are so impressed with Aspen Community Foundation and the Early Childhood Coalition, and that from their perspective, we have some real grown-up kids in this side of the valley, and they wish that there was more of that on the Eagle side. And they are striving and attempting to replicate what we have going here. So I want to recognize that, and I appreciate, and so to recognize the weight and the knowledge that you're bringing here, and that you've been doing this for such a long time. This isn't a new, fresh startup. These are organizations that have been around. So I do really value that. I'm curious for more information to see other examples from other municipalities. I know town of Breckenridge. I used to nanny for Jen Megatamney, who started much of the early childhood partnerships over there, and I'd like for her or for there to be some examples of those partnerships, what they've looked like, and learning takeaways from those. A smart person learns from their own mistakes, and a wise person learns from others, and we can do that from a civic level. And then another question is, I'd like to see some just general ballpark numbers of what is available on Eagle County for the general fund. Are we talking 100,000, or are we talking 5 million? What, I mean.
Somewhere in between.
But to have more of that conversation, otherwise, I'm gonna go back to my burger, shake, and fries. You go to the counter and you're not gonna order not knowing what you have in your pocket.
Well,
So-
could we add that to a joint meeting? They wanna have one with us, so this is definitely a topic that we want to hit them on. Obviously, we have lots of topics that we probably wanna hit Eagle County up with, but they could answer some of that funding, because it's really at the discretion of the commissioners.
And we are trying to organize and find a date for the next joint meeting, and offered potentially a few topics to them, that being one of them, a discussion of this project, just knowing that it was going to be coming up, and that Commissioner McQueenie had participated in, and that follows or aligns with some of their goals.
And one more, to follow up as well, of having some sort of plan in place of what entity is interested in spearheading this and managing, owning it, maintaining it, and where does that funding source come from?
That's a good point.
Yep.
Bill?
Just a couple observations. You don't have to work at all to persuade me that early childhood education and childcare is valuable. It's the foundations upon which we build all of the educational structures. And so, fully with you on that. Just kind of curious, as an observer, kind of how much of a dent this will make in the demand or in the excess demand. So if you had said that there are currently 300, 320 kids on any given day, if we're going to add 90 to 100, how much of the unmet demand does that serve? Who's the audience for the service? Is it people who are commuting in from Rifle and further afield? Or is it people resident in the valley? You know, kind of, who's our target audience for this? And it could be all of them. I guess the money has to be an issue, as Jen said. It's hard to go into a discussion without knowing how much it could cost. So if the price tag for construction is 8 million to 10 million, what then is the value of the land? How much does that bring to this total financial transaction? I'm with Auden though too, where I just worry about mixing mandates. And if our primary concern is providing high quality childcare and early years education, why get involved with affordable housing? I mean, we know from the town's perspective that managing units is a job that other people perform. Now, it could work because it kind of sounds like the reciprocal of what Stotts Mill is doing. They're building a bunch of residences and then they are hiring a private contractor, developer, manager to deal with the childcare, or at least that was the original formulation. It may have changed, but that was what I had understood. They were looking for an independent educational institution to manage the childcare that they were going to provide. This could be the reciprocal of that. You know, you deal with the education and farm out the rest. Give it to a property manager, a owner-operator, something. But I don't think you want to belabor your staff in the school with the responsibility of collecting rent, going and fixing bathtubs and toilets and stuff like that. But the mixed use could be kind of interesting. You know, also interested in precedent and other examples, because it certainly goes to the issue of core density, having people live where they work, where their kids are educated, and where they build, or whatever, put down roots.
I think it's a great introduction. I think, as you've heard, there's a million questions and we're just starting down this long road. But it seems like we're all kind of weighing in on affordable housing or no affordable housing. And it seems to me that having affordable housing just makes sense, because why wouldn't you want some of your staff to have housing right there on site? I understand that there's this center that may be diminished. But it just seems to me like we know we have a child care crisis, we have a affordable housing crisis, we have land. Let's attempt to address both issues. So I'm interested to see how this progresses and how Basalt participates. Thank you.
Anyone else? Cool. Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So how far am I behind? I'm not
We
doing well.
started
Maybe we can
45 minutes.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Yeah, so
We did
cut yourself
start.
some slack there, Gary.
But I think we're gonna pick up right here.
For 15 minutes.
So here we
I'll
go.
be quick.
Yeah, so the next one is a public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 9, series of 2018, an ordinance of the Town Council of Basalt, amending fines, penalties, administrative fees pursuant to section 2-381 of the municipal code of the Town of Basalt, Colorado, and it's got Ryan's name on it.
That's right. So this is the second reading, and this is a follow-up, of course, to the ordinance that we had passed a few months ago that changed the minimum legal sales age for all tobacco products from 18 to 21. In addition, we put a requirement for local licensing in there. And so basically what this does is adopt fees per code that would be commensurate with essentially the effort that would be expended by staff to stand this program up and to continue it throughout the year. And there are also in here fines that are coincident with fines that we already have, and so we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. But in a nutshell, I think we had a good worksheet to work from that gave us a great idea of how much time and effort we'd be spending to do the licensing and then the enforcement. So with that, staff is recommending approval.
Okay, anyone have questions? Okay, not, I'll open the public hearing at 7:53. Does anyone from the public want to talk about this one? Hearing none, close that and bring it back to council. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that the town council adopt ordinance number 9, series of 2018 on second reading.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So next one is the first reading of ordinance number 10, series of 2018, an ordinance of the Town Council of Basalt adopting miscellaneous amendments to the Basalt Community Housing Guidelines. James.
Thank you. This is, excuse me, continued consideration of an ordinance that would approve of miscellaneous amendments to the community housing guidelines. As background, as was discussed at the last meeting, the town's community housing guidelines have provisions that allow for retirees to live in deed-restricted community housing units in Basalt without meeting the 1,500-hour work limitation that's in the guidelines, as long as they worked in the valley at least 10 years prior to retiring, and that they volunteer at least 1,000 hours per year. As was discussed at the last meeting, this provision was put in the community housing guidelines in 2009 as a result of work by a citizen committee as well as council members at the time that were working on affordable housing issues. Bach had recommended reducing the volunteer requirement that staff presented Bach's recommendation at the last meeting. Staff received direction from council at the last meeting to come back with language maintaining the 1,000-hour requirement for retirees, and then also making it clear that if you had a unit and you retired, you were able to remain in those units as long as you met that 1,000-hour volunteer requirement, but that you could not, if you retired before trying to get into a community housing unit, you could not get in. So staff has provided that language. We've also included a couple of the cleanups that were in the ordinance at the last meeting as well, related to references that were misreferenced in the current guidelines. So staff would recommend asking questions of staff if you have them, then taking public comments and providing council discussion on the item.
Okay, thanks, James. Questions for James? Okay. You wanted to do a public hearing on this?
We'd like to take public comments because I do believe we've got
I
Bach
see one
members
back
here
there,
this
so
evening. We've got Doug
I'll open the
McDonald.
public hearing at 7:55. Doug.
My name is Doug McDonald. I'm speaking on behalf of the Affordable Housing Commission. With regard to the Ordinance 10 Exhibit B, for which multiple cleanup changes were made, that particular set of changes as it's written, we think contributes to the Basalt vision of a community that's coherent and allows people to both work and live in the same place, and so we're endorsing that portion. Regarding the Exhibit B, which is, James just referred to, and the requirement for retirees to continue a 1,000 hour per year volunteer requirement in order to maintain their place in affordable housing, we're not particularly happy with that requirement. It simply seems that if you imagine a person having acquired eligibility for public housing by working for 10 years in the town and or completing 3 years worth of 1,000 hours a year of volunteer work, then upon retirement, it's not really retirement. What it's really doing is putting this person in the position of having to work a half-time job, 1,000 hours per year, in order, and paying rent at the same time, in order to keep that spot. And there's no time limit on that, so you're working until you die, And that sounds more or less like slavery as opposed to volunteerism to us. So the concept of having people volunteer for the town is a great idea. It builds community. We like that part. But the numbers seem more like slavery and not volunteerism. So that's our position. We think that the numbers should be reduced, the requirements should be reduced back to the original proposal that staff made to cut those numbers of hours in half. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks.
Anyone else? Hearing none, close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Anyone?
It's a tough act to follow.
Good.
But
Auden? Sorry.
I mean, Doug, that's a great point. I think we're trying to deal with this challenge we talked about last time, is how do you not fill up your housing with retirees? But, and I don't think we're gonna solve that question tonight, but I think that, that's right, 1,000 hours is a lot, and you're getting older and older. And the truth is, if you're trying to volunteer in the community a lot, it's often hard to find volunteer positions. So I think that's a good point.
I guess the notion of volunteerism I fully support. As I guess looking at the practical implications of this, however, I myself would find it unconscionable and unlikely that any mayor or any town council would forcibly evict a retiree who did not perform 1,000 hours of service, particularly if they were advanced in years and were infirm and incapable of performing those 1,000 hours. I also find it unlikely that staff is going to invest any significant amount of effort monitoring, overseeing, and holding accountable the retirees. So on that basis, though, Doug, I think as a guideline, it is a valuable reference. It's probably not much comfort that as a practical matter is unlikely to be enforced as strictly as the letter of the law is written, but it is indeed the policy. And so I don't know how to get over that conundrum.
Okay, anyone else? Jen?
I'm on the same vein as Bill, that there are reasons for policy, and it's a not a protectionism, and not a withholding of citizens of what they've been part of or paid into a system. But the policy, the way that it currently stands, prevents the system of being taken advantage of. And I always want to believe in the best of every human and of each other. And with that, the policies structure how we achieve that. At advanced age, the way that I understood that the policy was that the 1,000 hours, is that in perpetuity, no matter what your age is?
Yeah, the way it's written currently.
Sure.
And proposed.
Okay.
Wasn't it different when we talked about it 2 weeks ago?
Right, wasn't there a proposal on the,
There was a diminishing of hours.
Right, that's what
That was what,
Bob proposed. So James, do you want to summarize?
We went
Yeah.
back to the 1,000 hours at the last meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to remember like why we did that.
yeah, what Bach had proposed and we presented to council at the previous meeting was basically reducing the number of hours between 65 and 70 to 500, and then above 75 to, I think it was 80, I believe, at 250, and then beyond 80, you weren't required, was the Bach proposal at the last meeting. You could, just thinking about it, you could add language based on Bill's comments that the Special Housing Evaluation Committee on a case-by-case basis could look at the potential to waive in scenarios where somebody couldn't do the.
If there is a bona fide good faith effort, but infirmity prevents something greater. But I think part of one of the policy issues that we certainly have to grapple with is the notion of opportunity as well. Because while there are certainly great sympathies and emotion and empathy for the retiree, there is also the notion of others who may demand or need, as the case may be, affordable housing as well, who are also valuable and contributing members to the community. And it could be in any line of work. It's not related to that. So then how do we avoid that moral hazard, if you will, if not through an enforcement of a policy?
I think there's a way out of this, which is approve this, but default to the old approach, which is, as you described, 500 and diminishing, and
The old is 1,000 hours and.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was proposed at some point. Bach proposed it.
Bach proposed last time.
Okay,
Old meaning.
that sounds a lot more reasonable to me. I'd support that just to get this done, and then I'd say we should flag this and talk about it. It's something, it's a bigger policy issue. I don't think you make policy based on, maybe they want to enforce it. That doesn't seem right.
No.
And then having a one-off review doesn't make sense either.
Right.
But 1,000 hours seems insane.
Well, and the last time we talked about it, Ryan.
No,
The last time we talked about it, well, our big concern was what's happening in a lot of affordable housing right now is that people are retiring in it, and then it's not available to the workforce. So there's this balance that we're trying to play. I think, I was on the keep it at 1,000 last time, and listening to Doug, but also really thinking about this another 2 weeks. When I read this again, I was like, when I started thinking what 1,000 hours really is, I was like, wow, that's a lot of time for a retiree. I do believe, there should be, I like the other requirements that you have to be 10 years, or of 3 of the years you could be 1,000 hours. But I do believe that, looking at Bach's original, I think they got to where we wanted to go, is to keep them as contributing members of the community, if you're going to keep affordable housing, because you're getting a community asset.
Yeah.
And so, but you're providing to the community. I started looking at what 500 hours is. That's still a significant amount of time. And I was like, you know what? I'm pretty okay with that sliding scale going back to that. I think I overreacted last time and was really just concerned about not allowing affordable housing to just all of a sudden all the retirees to be in. So I'd be okay with going back to the original proposal of, I think it was 500.
250 and then 0.
250 and then 0. So I'd be happy with that, because it does do that, and we could see how it's working.
Yeah. I mean, in fact, people who want to volunteer are going to volunteer anyway, regardless of their age. But I think this is, again, to protect against the moral hazard and to again, provide for equal access for those who want to come into the community, while recognizing that many of these folks, I'm sure, are of the highest of virtue and have contributed long years to either government or educational functions in our community, and I'm sure they have only great motivations. And having a policy that does require some amount of investment in the community upon retirement makes sense. And if it is a step-down version over years or decades, that seems sensible.
I'd like to hear what were the ages and.
Sure, the ages were basically 65 to 70 would be 500 hours, and then 70 to 75, 71 to 75 would be 250, and then above 75 it was 0.
And if you live to 90, it jacks up to 1,000 because you're tough enough to deal with it.
You get a reward.
Exactly.
I'm okay with that. Is everyone, I've changed my mind on it, and I don't know if other people have. I've kind of gone back. You were part of the Bach conversations, and were you okay with that originally coming out, or?
I wasn't I did not attend those meetings, and I think, I'm not gonna go with a feeling, I'm going to clarify this as a thinking statement, that thinking about what our Basalt future and what we're doing with affordable housing and our collection that we do have going, what is the, how do you even define, you know, you can get into this whole, how do you define what is the best ideal of what to use affordable housing for? But I just really want to bring it back to our taxpayers and us as a council have invested a lot of money into these locations, these housing, and it is partnership with businesses, with other governmental entities, et cetera. And I really see this more as workforce housing than retirement housing, and that there are specific developments that are specifically made for retirement situations. And I just want to clarify that, yeah.
I have another point of clarification. James, if I understand correctly, this policy only relates to the 18 units of municipally owned housing.
No.
Or it applies to all
this is
138.
Privately owned.
Yeah.
The
units,
120.
The 120.
On top, well, we have 138 total, of which 120 are in the private sector. We own 18. Okay, so this applies to all 138.
This applies to 120, the privately owned units. The next topic
the
that
other
we'll
18.
discuss is the other 18, the town-owned units.
So why didn't we
And
have?
those
Okay, I'm
ones are
not
not retirement eligible, as I understand it.
And most of the
Oh.
town-owned units are not deed restricted, so that's why this doesn't really.
So if somebody in town employment retires in one of the 18 units that the town owns, they are not subject to these same retirement obligations?
Well, just a clarification, if you're a deed restricted unit, the deed restriction, the more restrictive of the two prevails, so the housing guidelines would prevail. But by way of example, the snowmass units don't have a deed restriction. The unit that Ryan lives in doesn't have a deed restriction, so they would just be covered by that next policy that you're talking about.
Okay,
Which is 3 months after
90 days.
leaving.
Okay,
Yeah,
after
90.
separation. Okay, then the other question, how many people are vulnerable to this policy of 1,000 hours or 500? Do we have that many retirees encumbering the 120 units?
We don't have any at the moment.
Okay,
So
so,
that's why we're doing it now, because you want to address it before
Right.
it comes. I mean, you see it in Aspen where it's been happening, so our units are relatively new. So,
well, frankly, it seems like there are so many other restrictions on how many years of service and in what capacity and function. I think we're relatively well protected.
I'd say we approve it as we've discussed, but let's flag it. We need to learn more about what other communities are doing to deal with this retirement issue and understand it better. Because the other thing that feels weird is, it's almost like we're using the wrong tool to keep people, to recoup the benefits we're giving someone who retires in the housing. It's like, give us volunteer hours, but it's not like that's gonna be, this person is gonna be an EMT or a firefighter. It's not necessarily great added value to the community. So I think we need to revisit it, but not tonight.
Well, the thing is, this is only first reading, so we are gonna revisit it
Yeah.
at the next meeting, so we do have a little time to do a little bit of research on other communities, just a little. I'm trying not to give you guys a ton of work. But, we are bringing this back, so I would say, it seems like, if somebody wanted to make a motion to just get this through first reading.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we, what are we on, 8B here? 8C, that we approve on first reading ordinance 10, series of 2018, with the amendment that we default the original guidance by Bach on volunteer hours.
Okay, any other discussion?
Sorry, who was second on that? Thank you, Ryan.
Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank God. Next one, more affordable housing. A resolution of the town, Council of Basalt, approving miscellaneous amendments to the policy for administering town-owned employee housing units.
So this proposed change to the policy applies to town-owned units, so this is the 18 units that the town owns. And it's to increase the status of full-time employees working within the town of Basalt limits in the occupancy priorities for the town-owned units. As we went through at the last meeting, the current occupancy priorities for the town-owned units include employees for the town of Basalt as a first priority, and then government and special district employees meeting the Category 2 income requirements as a second priority. And Bach had provided a proposal to promote Basalt employees that are general Basalt employees that don't work for the town above the special district and other government employees. The council, however, indicated concerns at the last meeting about having general employees in Basalt being put in a higher occupancy priority group to special district and government employees that work in the 3-mile planning area. So staff went back to Bach and discussed the council's concerns with Bach. And so Bach recommended putting general Basalt employees kind of at the same level as other government employees, as well as special district employees in the 3-mile planning area. They also recommended putting nonprofit employees in the 3-mile planning area kind of on that same occupancy level, so that there's kind of a fair playing field between those 3 groups. It was kind of a compromise position to what they had previously proposed, so that we didn't have the issue of general Basalt employees being above and getting priority over special district employees and other government employees. There was also some council members that had some concerns about employees of significant Basalt employers being able to house their employees in town of Basalt units. Bach did not share that concern and suggested looking at housing as a community housing and not focusing on distinguishing between different Basalt businesses. However, if council is concerned about that as a whole, you could distinguish between large and small businesses by suggesting that staff add language that would distinguish between employees for businesses that have less than 20 employees. That was kind of where staff, in doing some research, kind of saw that there was a line between large and small businesses. Also, it should be noted that council did not seem to be supportive of extending the amount of time that each occupancy priority would be put out for advertisement. It's still included in the draft reso because Bach thought it was important to keep that in there. However, if council is concerned about that, as part of your motion, you could request that that be taken out if that's a concern. So staff would suggest, as we did with the other one, taking staff questions and then also taking public comments, because we do have Bach members here still, and providing council discussion.
Okay. Does anyone have questions for James before public comment? I'll open the public comment. Come on up, Doug.
Ryan, keep it very brief here. But regarding this differentiation of people that work for small businesses versus people that work for large businesses, our understanding was that this was prompted by the underlying financial thought that large businesses had the resources, the wherewithal to provide housing or housing assistance to their employees, whereas small businesses did not. I think that our perspective is, in the real world, maybe SKICO may in fact have that kind of ability and does provide help, but for the most part, other businesses, especially ones that are in Basalt, like food businesses, are not likely to provide housing or housing subsidies for their employees, particularly if their employees are part-time employees. These are typically lower-paid people, and they're not going to have that kind of help. So what we're doing, if we go ahead with this, is we're just arbitrarily discriminating against that labor pool and saying, well, because, you know, the person that you happen to work for is in this category, you don't qualify. We just feel that it's a wrong way to make a distinction, as simple as that. If you feel strongly about it, then a way around this might in fact be to limit eligibility to employees who are eligible and do not receive any subsidization from their employer, and make it that way, not big ones and small ones, and not load the staff with trying to figure it all out. Thanks.
Did you want to point out Kathy's?
There's no other public in the room, so we'll close the public hearing.
I would like to please identify that we did receive a letter from the chair of BOC late this afternoon as well. It says, in reviewing recommended amendments to the town's housing policies, BOC believes these policies are most equitable for providing community housing. We believe that building community in the Mid-Valley is one of the primary goals of our BOC charge. In this regard, providing opportunities for affordable living in Basalt is the key to a healthy and vibrant town. Thank you for consideration.
Okay. And Bill?
I have a question about what, and I'm sure it's buried in here, but what qualifies someone as a Basalt employee? And the reason I ask this is because I know of organizations that have multiple locations, but wherever their headquarters is located is where they're able to apply for affordable housing. So like in Aspen, if you are headquartered in Aspen, but you have locations in Carbondale and Basalt, you can only apply for housing in Aspen because that's the headquarters. Do we have a similar limitation?
We traditionally have been requiring that they have their main office of employment. A specific tenant has their main office of employment in the Basalt town limits.
So for
to
example,
meet that category.
So for like Ski Cove, their headquarters is clearly Aspen or Chicago or somewhere not Basalt. Sure. Same with Whole Foods, City Market, Amazon. They wouldn't qualify?
If somebody had most of their hours in Chicago or Aspen, they wouldn't qualify for the top priority. The majority of their hours would have to be worked here in Basalt.
So it's where the individual spends their time, not where the company
specific,
happens to be.
The specific tenant, that is.
Does that differ from Aspen and APSHA?
It is different, the way I understand it. Keep in mind, it's hard for us to speak to someone else's, but it was kind of an issue, I think, that the ski company was having. I mean, that people that were potentially coming down here were concerned about.
So APSHA has it that wherever your headquarters is, not where you spend time.
You know what, it's dangerous again for us to, but I think that was an issue in Aspen that they're probably trying to work through some way. I was just trying to look at our language, because I thought on the government employees, maybe we should add a clarification.
How we've been doing it in practice is where, the majority of your hours as a prospective tenant are worked is what category you fit in.
Okay, thank you.
Bill?
I have to agree with Doug that I think it would be incredibly perilous for us to embark on a policy of discrimination based upon your employer. I think that would be extremely wrong-headed to go down that path, and I would defer to our legal counsel, but I think that would prepare us for a challenge of a legal and judicial variety. But I want to applaud, James, your elegance in crafting a solution that I think is very workable, frankly, as I read it currently. And I particularly like the fact that you have explicitly included NGOs and nonprofits in the category of eligible under the second priority. So that makes an awful lot of sense to me. I did want to raise a question unrelated, or a point that is unrelated to the priority, but it's a point on whatever is page 52 of 80, which is simply the policy on separation. Our policy on separation is very clear. Upon separation from one or another of the eligible categories, you have a very distinct 90-day period during which you will vacate. And so I am just raising that as a point of order and for the record.
Okay, anyone else? Auden?
You wanna go, Jen?
Go for it. Oh.
I'd support this option one, and I would make a appeal to the council. I think the extended waiting period, going from 2 weeks to 3, or application period, is sensible, and it would do more of what this council wants to do, which is allow people to get their act together and secure the housing, and that would support the priorities that we've listed. So I'd support it as written, James. I wouldn't change it.
Jen?
I have a question regarding how the employment area has changed to 3 Mile area. Can you please clarify what the employment area previously was defined as?
So the employment area is from Aspen to Glenwood, which is the full employment area. But through the different priority sections, you've got different priorities for different locations. So the employment area is defined in the community housing guidelines is Aspen to Glenwood, but in the the second priority group, we're reducing that to the 3 Mile planning area. But if you get through the first couple priorities and we still don't have a prospective tenant, then it opens up to Aspen to Glenwood.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes. This is not specific, but since we've opened this can of worms, I'd like to bring it up, that it's interesting. I do support that a qualified person must not own developed residential real estate or a mobile home that has an address within the Roaring Fork drainage. And I further feel that that should state, if you're going to live in our highly subsidized affordable housing, you shouldn't own real estate anywhere. Why could you own a house, in Nantucket or anywhere else and qualify to reside in our affordable housing?
One point that I might bring up, just as far as that goes,
Yeah.
is, so it's possible that, you had a parent that passed away and you ended up acquiring their house or some kind of property. If I look to a place that I came from in the Tucson market, the value of many homes there is quite low and wouldn't be enough if you were renting it out to, cover, the delta between what our affordable rents would go and what a market rate rent would go for. And so, I think that's these folks are choosing to live here and are dealing with, the present condition as far as that pricing. If we then start to scrutinize, their financial situation, I think it could just, end up going, putting staff down a rabbit hole that is a difficult one.
Right. Well, it comes back to this general concept that APSHA has considered and many other locations regarding affordable housing as asset caps. And that's what I'm bringing up.
So once you get past.
Not for our housing.
Right. There's no for our housing.
Just as a clarification, we do have asset caps for general employees. We don't have asset caps for Town of Basalt employees.
Right.
And the reason
That's what I'm getting at.
we didn't originally have asset caps or income caps is because the council at the time was interested in the potential to put manager-level employees in the units, and usually they would be beyond those income and asset caps on the affordable housing.
And they might have left a house back in their market, so they would be eligible right away. know, they had a house, you know, say they came from Indiana and they have a house back there, they come here, we can put them in housing. You know, what kind of, you know, on the town manager position, you have a lot more flexibility when you're negotiating his contract to kind of figure that kind of thing out, if you want to give him a limit to how long he can live in that housing unit. The other employees don't necessarily have contracts.
Right, okay. It's just a point to bring up for us to, while this is open,
Yeah,
for us to
it's something
consider it.
that, you know, Bach has some other things that they had wanted to work on. I think that these policies are kind of a evolving thing, so if you want to bring it up to Bach is a better way. But again, on the town-owned units, I think the general philosophy was to try to get people living and working in town as quickly as you can, so we weren't trying to have to send something to Sheck if someone, you know, again, had a house that their mother owned in Tucson, or that they left their employment and they had a house back in their previous job.
Sure.
But what about, there's a very popular thing that's been happening in our valley, especially before recession, but it seems to be happening again, and that is people buying rental units, for example, in Rifle. That's outside of our watershed, and
Yes.
people are allowed to live in our subsidized housing and buy a house in Rifle or an apartment in Rifle for a fraction of the cost. I'm just asking if
Oh,
this
it's actually,
allowed.
Rifles listed as one of,
It's
so
excluded.
it talks about,
But
no
it
name-
doesn't go to Grand Junction, it's,
Yeah, originally we did have Grand Junction in there, that whole county. We include,
Goes as far west as
Basalt, yeah.
Rifle.
and then it includes no name. And I remember at one time we had Grand Junction in there, and I don't remember who took it out or why. But you could, you know, we could bring it back to Bach. We had some accessibility issues also that we wanted to kind of look at Bach that we're not ready yet, that are part of kind of a larger discussion that Doug had identified to look at. So we could look at it if you had some other thoughts as to how we can deal with that. We're not trying to allow people to have investment property and live in a town unit. You know, that certainly isn't the purpose.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, I feel like this conversation just brings up that this is an endless conversation, and that we are just gonna constantly be coming up with new issues. But to kind of bring it back to what we're trying to discuss tonight, I mean, last time I was really adamant about the large versus the small, and I value what Bach has said and all the time that they put into these contemplations, but I still just stand by, like, this is just my philosophy, is that, I mean, we have Amazon in our community. I mean, this is billions, and I, as just a normal person, am subsidized housing for this massive organization. And it just goes back to, like, a bigger problem with our country, and that is that middle-class America subsidizes the billionaires and these massive corporations. And it's just really hard for me to pass legislation, or however we want to describe this, to further that and support that. And so I'm just really hung up on this large versus small, because I want to support our community, and that just doesn't feel like supporting our community. Although I totally understand where Bach is coming from, where this is the individual and not the corporation, but I'm just struggling with that, and I can't make the leap yet.
so I'd like to propose along the lines of Katie, for the discussion tonight on second reading, for it to come back to have the headquarters clarification stated, that if your business is headquartered in Basalt, then that fits within our policy, because in that case, it opens it up more for the small community-owned, who are community-owned businesses and employees. It's a twofold. Rather than it just being about the renter, it also includes the business owners who are the employers.
So just as a clarification, this is a resolution, so it is one reading.
Oh, okay.
And so that's just a clarification. You can continue it.
Sure.
I would just offer that I think the discussion wasn't the headquarters issue gets at Amazon, but it doesn't get at the city market employee and the Whole Foods employee. It gets at Amazon, but it doesn't get at those.
Do we have Amazon?
Yeah, I was gonna say, where was Amazon?
Whole Foods. Whole
Oh,
Foods
right.
is Amazon, yeah.
But the person,
I see.
the person working at Whole Foods is just part of our community.
Right.
It's the person working at this gas station, the liquor store, or, you know,
I think this is.
I get what you're trying to do, and I really appreciate it, but I really liked what Doug's statement is. These people are part of our community, and they need housing just as much as a small business person too. Yes, I would like them to make more money, but I would also like someone at the gas station to make more money, and someone at the local clothing store to make more money, so we're.
What I would like them to do is participate in subsidizing their employees so that they can live here appropriately.
Correct, but there's tons of businesses too that we would hope they would do that, you know, that aren't, so.
But that's,
Well, instead of getting into a huge debate about that piece, I mean, are we ready to pass this resolution just to continue to update the code, knowing that there are more iterations that have to become? We can also charge Bach with, trying to delve into that issue a little bit more to really see, because the staff had some potential ways to deal with that without actually trying to get into the number of employees or location and stuff. So, I mean, my personal view on this is I really like where Bach was going on this. I see both sides of the story. I'd love Amazon to come in and build affordable housing for all their employees. I think it would be phenomenal and what the company should do. But I really like the employees of Whole Foods and City Market. Kroger is huge. They should be building affordable housing. We haven't really, pushed that issue, and I think that's another issue that we can talk about as a town council. But to hold up all these changes for that, I don't know if, I don't know if I'm willing to do that, because Bach has worked really hard on a lot of these changes, and a lot of them I really appreciate, because I want more priority to go to these, like, fire districts and special districts, and I don't necessarily want to hold this up. I'd rather get that going and then deal with this bigger issue, but,
Yeah, I'd just add that, speaking for Ski-Co, and this would apply probably to Whole Foods, is they have to pursue housing for their employees. Ski-Co has spent, closing in on hundreds of millions on housing. And in some ways, the problem's bigger because they're a bigger company. So, Whole Foods before it got bought, and it's maintained a lot of its values, is a good actor in the community. So I think we should pass it as I described, option one, and I'd extend the waiting period. And again, move it forward, but it's something we can continue to think about.
is that a motion?
Yes.
Ryan?
Just something to bring to light too, is just a reminder that we're talking about 18 units here that are town-owned and not 1,000.
Right.
And so most of our units end up getting snatched up pretty quickly by the first two categories. I think we have two, James did a count. There's two non-government type local workers, one of whom I know doesn't work for any chain or anything like that. So, and then we're going to be having the discussion like, well, gosh, do we want to own as many units as we currently have? So, it's not as big of an issue and one that, as you all have suggested, we bring back if it starts to, the scales start to tip as far as who's in there, I would just
Okay.
suggest.
Is there a motion?
I made it.
And there's no second yet.
I would second.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Against? Cool. All right. Next up. Thank you, James. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, Doug and James.
Next one is a resolution of the Town Council of Basalt appointing and retaining a town attorney. That's been sitting in the background.
So if I may speak to this one just briefly and address a couple of questions that were brought up, and actually we can look to the new attorney to answer a few of these. But just as clarification, the engagement letter essentially is an engagement with the firm, but we end up contracting or appointing specifically the town attorney, and that was per our charter, that we appoint a town attorney and not a law firm. And so a couple of the things that you all had talked about was the ability to do a review of the town attorney from time to time, and that is in there. The second thing was, of course, that we would have some sort of contractual arrangement with that town attorney. The other was the hourly fee, which will be $185 an hour for Mr. Conklin, and then the last is the severability or the termination of services clause. So we would be able to, with notice, sever our relationship with the firm. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Gary, to ask any questions of either staff or of the town attorney in that regard.
He's not the town attorney yet.
I'm sorry,
So,
of
Jeff,
the
do you wanna-
potential town attorney.
Do you want to say anything?
No, I think Ryan summarized that well. The resolution that's in your packet mostly reflects language that's in the town charter. So there used to be an appointment of a town attorney, but the engagement would be with my firm, and the town would get the benefit of all of my firm in representing the town.
Okay, questions?
And I guess one other thing is under the town charter and just in general, the termination of our services it's at will, and so there isn't any any contract that has severance provisions or things like that. So.
Okay. Any questions? Don't say that, Pam.
Still sitting here, Pam.
Just checking.
Okay, anyone? Motion?
Mayor, I move the motion of town council to adopt resolution number 11, series of 2018.
Second.
Okay, any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Congratulations.
I look forward to working with you all.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff.
Scoot
And
over,
we'll have a seat
Susan.
for you, yeah.
Then he gets to sit for the whole meeting.
And he's got a sense
Yeah,
of humor.
here's a
That's good
binder.
thing.
All right, so the next one's a resolution of the Town Council of Basalt amending the town's policies for special events and commercial activities on town-owned properties. I guess it's Watkins.
Hello. It is summer or close to it, and one of the things that means in the planning department is that we're starting to get a lot of questions and requests and applications for special events. And so what happens, the way that works is when a group comes and they want to hold some kind of special event, they fill out a special event activity permit for us. And then the way it works right now is if they are proposing to close a street or close more than 5 parking spaces, or if it's gonna be a recurring event, occur more than once, then we bring it to you all, and you see it on your consent agenda there. But since we do get a lot of requests, the purpose of this resolution here is to kind of, one, to streamline the process for you all and for the special event organizers. And then the other thing that this does is change our policies on commercial activities that take place on town property. We used to have a group called the BDBA, the Basalt Downtown Business Association, that is no more. And so it seems cleaner to take out that reference, so that's the other thing this does. There are a lot of details in the proposed resolution. I'm happy to go through them with you all. But I thought maybe we could take any questions, take discussion from you guys and do public comment also, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay. So one of the biggest changes I see here is taking it away from the town council having to approve every single special event and allowing staff to approve that. So is that?
Yeah, that's the main thing.
And specifically the technical review committee, the TRC.
Okay.
So it's a power grab by the TRC?
I
That's
know.
what it seems like to me, too.
That's why
Yep.
Chief Knott's still here. He wants it. So, anyone have questions on that one? I mean, I'm in favor, because, we see these all the time. It's been very rare that we have ever even gone beyond consent on this, and some of these special events are really cool for the town, so.
Mayor, I move that town council adopt resolution number 12, series of 2018.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. We're done.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
It was in a field trip and,
Did you get a new case for your iPad?